They say he stands still even now, his skin turned to stone, his arms trembling beneath the weight of eternity. Atlas, the Titan who defied the gods and bore the heavens themselves. Yet before he was condemned to hold up the sky, he was a warrior, a brother, a father, and a dreamer of freedom. This is the story of rebellion and consequence, of a being who tried to balance order and defiance, love and duty, until the stars themselves became his burden. But was Atlas truly punished, or chosen? Tonight, let us descend into the quiet age before Olympus, when Titans ruled and the world was young, and trace the rise, the fall, and the eternal endurance of the one who holds the cosmos. Before the world had a name, before the first dawn lit the edge of eternity, there was only chaos, not disorder as mortals imagine it, but a deep, breathing stillness. It was the pause before sound, the vast inhale before the universe spoke its first word. From that silence, two forces emerged, Gaia, the earth, who would cradle all things, and Uranus, the sky, whose endless dome arched above her. Together, they began the shaping of existence. Where Gaia rose in green and stone, Uranus wrapped her in a shimmering veil of light. From their union came mountains, oceans, clouds, and the first divine children, the Titans. They were colossal beings of raw creation, spirits of mountain and storm, of rivers and flame. Each was a law unto themselves. Cronus, the youngest and cunning, mastered time. Rhea, the nurturing one, shaped the cycles of life. And among them was Atlas, born with eyes like molten bronze, steady and wide as horizons themselves. Even as a child of Titans, Atlas was different. Where his siblings roared, he listened. Where they shattered stone, he studied the balance between it. He watched the sky as if it whispered to him alone, sensing that someday it might become his destiny, or his burden. In the earliest ages, there was no night or day. The world glowed with a constant twilight, soft, golden, unchanging. Rivers wandered without banks. Winds moved without names. Time had not yet been measured. And yet, beneath this eternal dusk, Atlas began to wonder. Why must the world remain still? Why did the sky never rest upon the earth? He could feel the tension between his parents, Gaia and Uranus, love tangled with control. Uranus pressed too closely upon the earth, trapping her children in the darkness of her womb. The Titans, vast and restless, yearned for open air. Atlas, stronger than most, felt that suffocating closeness. The heavens weighed upon him even before fate decreed it so. He imagined lifting the sky, not in defiance, but in mercy, to give space between heaven and earth, to let all things breathe. It was not rebellion yet, only a dream of balance. But balance, as he would learn, was not easily won in the house of the gods. From the depths of Gaia's sorrow and Uranus's pride, the first seeds of conflict began to stir. The sky, fearful of his own children's might, kept them buried within the earth. The ground trembled with their frustration. Atlas, with his vast shoulders and quiet endurance, bore the pressure silently. For ages, he endured the crushing closeness, until endurance itself became his identity. And then came the whisper, Gaia's voice, low and ancient, echoing through roots and stone. My sons, the world is too small beneath his shadow. Free yourselves, and let the sky rise. Cronus heard and sharpened his resolve. Oceanus, the gentle Titan of waters, recoiled in doubt. But Atlas listened with a quiet fire. He understood his mother's pain and the necessity of change. Creation itself was suffocating. He stood beside his brothers as they looked toward the heavens, plotting rebellion. For the first time, Atlas lifted his gaze not in awe, but in defiance. The idea of overthrowing Uranus was no longer unthinkable, it was inevitable. Yet in that moment, the young Titan did not imagine blood or ruin. He imagined peace, a space between sky and earth, a world where creation could breathe. He could not know that this very wish would shape his destiny, that someday, he would stand forever between those same realms, holding apart the forces he once sought to balance. The wind thickened, the stars dimmed. In the deep, still dark before the first war, Atlas felt something stir inside him, not ambition, but purpose. To hold, to bear, to balance. That was his nature. Even then, he was becoming what the cosmos would demand of him. When Uranus descended to lie upon Gaia once more, his shadow fell across the young Titans. His voice rumbled through the earth like thunder before rain. My children will not see the light above. The heavens are mine alone. In that decree, the universe learned its first injustice. And so, the Titans' silence deepened into resentment. Among them, Atlas remained calm, the steady mountain in a storm of rising fury. Yet deep in his chest, the same fire burned. When Cronus finally raised the sickle to strike their father, Atlas would be there, the mind behind the movement, the unseen pillar of their rebellion. But that is another tale, one of blood and sky, of creation through destruction. For now, we linger in this dawnless age, where the first laws of heaven and earth were still being written. The world had form but not yet meaning. The Titans ruled but did not yet understand rule. Atlas watched, learned, endured, waiting for the moment when endurance itself would become divine. And so, as the stars whispered their first names, and the wind learned to carry stories across the void, a single question trembled in the silence between heaven and earth. When even the heavens were young, what made one Titan dream of holding them? From the stillness that followed the first act of creation, the Titans rose into being, 12 mighty children born from the union of Gaia, the earth, and Uranus, the sky. They were the architects of existence, beings whose breath could carve valleys and whose thoughts could summon oceans. Among them stood the brothers and sisters who would shape eternity: Cronus, cunning and cold as sharpened bronze; Rhea, the mother heart of the cosmos; Hyperion, whose eyes burned with light; Thea, who gave that light form; and Atlas, whose silence carried the weight of mountains. The Titans did not rule, they simply were. To them, time was not yet a river but a lake, still, wide, and eternal. The air shimmered with youth. Rivers ran like glass. Mountains stretched without end. And in that endlessness, the Titans discovered their purpose: to give rhythm to what had none, to bring shape to the chaos that lingered beyond their borders. Atlas, even among immortals, was a mystery. He was not the loudest, nor the fiercest, but when the others quarreled, his voice ended storms. His siblings called him the shoulder of the world, even before the title meant anything. When the mountains groaned beneath their own height, Atlas steadied them. When the seas trembled in their boundaries, he calmed them with his stillness. There was a strange gentleness in his power, the kind that did not destroy but contained. Even Oceanus, whose waves wrapped the earth, often paused beside Atlas to listen to his musings. Everything seeks balance, Atlas once said, his deep voice echoing like distant thunder. Even the stars that do not yet shine will someday find their place. Oceanus laughed. And who will guide them, brother? Atlas looked upward, where the endless dome of Uranus pressed close upon the world. Perhaps, someone must. That answer unsettled Oceanus. It was not rebellion, yet it hinted at something dangerous: awareness. The Titans were eternal, but eternity can be lonely. When there is no death, curiosity becomes the only adventure. And curiosity, as the world would soon learn, could rival any weapon forged in Olympus or Tartarus. Cronus, the youngest and most cunning, grew restless beneath his father's rule. Uranus's shadow was endless, his control absolute. Every thought, every spark of independence among the Titans was crushed beneath the weight of his sky. He demanded silence. Obedience. Stillness. But the earth beneath him, Gaia herself, was no longer content to bear it. Her womb ached with the children he had buried, the Cyclopes and the Centimanes, beings of fire and storm, exiled to the deep caverns of the world for their strangeness. Her cries rippled through the roots of mountains and the marrow of the Titans. Atlas heard her pain. The very soil beneath his feet trembled like a living heartbeat. He knelt, pressing his hands against the ground, feeling the sorrow of the mother who had birthed them all. He presses too tightly upon me, Gaia whispered in the voice of wind and stone. I cannot breathe. And you, my children, cannot rise. Atlas bowed his head. Then who among us will lift the sky? The question hung in the air like prophecy. Cronus answered it with action. Secretly, he forged a sickle from adamantine, the hardest substance known to gods or men. He gathered his siblings, each trembling between fear and fury. Rhea wept, pleading for mercy. Hyperion's fire flared bright, casting light upon the council. And there stood Atlas, calm, calculating, watchful. He did not speak often, but when he did, even Cronus paused to listen. This act will shape more than gods, Atlas said quietly. It will shape the heavens themselves. Be certain, brother, for once done, it cannot be undone. Cronus's grin was thin and sharp. Then let it be done. That night, the world held its breath. Uranus descended once more to cover Gaia, to suffocate her creations. But this time, her children rose from the depths. Cronus struck, his blade cutting through sky and time. The first blood of the heavens fell upon the earth, and where it struck, new life would later grow, the giants, the Furies, and Aphrodite, born from foam and sorrow. The universe trembled. The rule of Uranus ended. The age of the Titans began. And through it all, Atlas did not raise a weapon. He stood at the edge of the battlefield, watching as the heavens broke apart, as fragments of sky scattered across eternity. He was both awed and haunted by what he witnessed, the beauty and terror of change. He understood what none of the others yet saw, that the moment power is taken, it begins to decay. That victory, when built on blood, already carries its end within it. But for now, the world was free. The air breathed again. The space between heaven and earth expanded, the first glimpse of balance Atlas had always envisioned. The Titans rejoiced, and Cronus declared himself king of the cosmos. His throne was carved from the bones of time itself, his rule gilded with abundance. The rivers sang, the fields grew golden, and the first golden age dawned. And yet, in the quiet beyond the celebration, Atlas stood at the world's western edge, watching where the sun dipped below the sea. He felt the horizon calling him, vast, unreachable, eternal. The others ruled, feasted, created temples of gold and light. Atlas simply looked to the sky, as if remembering the father they had slain. He did not mourn Uranus, not truly, but he mourned what was lost, the innocence of creation before blood had been spilled. The stars began to flicker for the first time, faint as the embers of a forgotten fire. Atlas whispered to them, "Do not fall." And in return, the wind whispered back, "Do not break." Somewhere within that whisper lay the faint outline of his destiny. But even the gods could not yet see the shadow of what was coming, the slow unraveling of their triumph, the prophecy that would turn brother against brother once more. For when gods shed blood, the heavens remember. And the heavens never forget. What secret did Atlas sense in the growing tension between sky and earth, and what fate waited for those who thought themselves immortal? The heavens were quiet again, but it was not peace that filled the silence, it was aftermath. The air still carried the echo of a scream that had once belonged to Uranus, the sky. The Titans, victorious and trembling from the birth of a new age, stood beneath a world remade by their hands. And yet, deep within that victory, Atlas felt something stir, something heavy, something unresolved. He had seen the unthinkable, a son rise against his father, a god cut down by his own creation. The act had opened the universe like a wound. And from that wound, consequences would one day pour like fire. For now, though, the Titans ruled. Cronus sat upon a throne of polished stone at the center of the cosmos, his crown forged from the shards of the broken sky. The Titans bowed before him, not out of love, but out of awe, for he had done what none dared dream. He had slain the heavens themselves. Atlas stood at his side as general and guardian. His strength was unmatched, his loyalty unquestioned. He held no weapon, for his arms were weapons enough. But unlike Cronus, he did not crave power. He craved order, the quiet symmetry between things. Under Cronus's command, the world took its first shape. Mountains rose, seas deepened, rivers found their courses. The stars, scattered like drops of blood across the void, began to spin in patterns, constellations forming under the watchful eyes of the Titans. And through it all, Atlas kept his gaze on the horizon, sensing that the balance they had fought for would not hold. Gaia, their mother, wandered the lands in sorrow. Though she had called for Uranus's fall, the act had wounded her. The sky no longer embraced her, it hovered far above, distant and cold. Atlas often found her seated among the valleys, tracing her fingers across the soil. "You freed me, my son," she whispered one day as Atlas approached. "But in freedom, I have lost his warmth." Atlas bowed his head. "You wished for breath between heaven and earth. You have it now." Her ancient eyes met his. "Yes. But the space between is lonely." Those words stayed with him. Even gods could grieve the balance they destroyed. While Atlas pondered these things, Cronus grew proud, and pride, among immortals, is a sickness that spreads without sound. He declared his rule eternal, promising an age of peace and golden plenty. The rivers sparkled like molten light, and the mortals who began to walk the earth lived without hunger or pain. The golden age, they would call it later. But even peace can grow restless. Cronus, like his father before him, began to fear the very children who might one day surpass him. He had watched Uranus fall by the hand of a son, and the memory haunted him like a reflection in water. Power, once taken, is never secure. Atlas noticed it first, the tension in his brother's gaze, the way Cronus's hand lingered near his weapon even in celebration. "You look for enemies where there are none," Atlas warned him gently. Cronus smiled thinly. "That is why there will never be any." Atlas studied him. "Father's shadow follows you, Cronus. You wear his fear." Cronus's expression darkened. "And you wear his doubt. Do not question me, brother." The distance between them widened, silent but certain. Meanwhile, far below the shining realm of the Titans, in the depths of the earth, the imprisoned children of Gaia, the Cyclopes and the Centimanes, stirred in darkness. Forgotten, they murmured curses against their kin. Their anger reached Gaia's heart, awakening her guilt. Once more, she began to dream of vengeance, not for herself, but for the sons buried alive in her womb. From that pain, another prophecy was born. The earth herself whispered it into the winds. As Cronus overthrew Uranus, so too shall a son of Cronus overthrow him. When Atlas heard this, the old heaviness in his chest returned. The universe, it seemed, was a wheel, spinning endlessly through betrayal and blood. He tried to reason with Cronus, to warn him that prophecy was not a chain but a lesson. "Do not repeat what we were meant to transcend," he urged. "End the cycle, brother. Let your children rise, not fall." But Cronus's heart had already hardened. He could not forget his father's fall, nor the hand that had helped him strike. He vowed no son would ever do the same to him. When his wife, Rhea, bore their first child, Cronus swallowed it whole. One by one, he devoured his offspring, Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, Poseidon, each consumed by the same fear that had once destroyed Uranus. The cries of the mother reached Atlas in his distant watchtower. He turned his face toward the east, where Rhea wept. "Brother," he murmured to the stars, "what have you become?" And the heavens above, silent witnesses to the endless pattern, began to tremble again. Atlas, ever the observer, began to see what others did not, that the universe itself resisted tyranny. The balance he longed for demanded motion, rise and fall, death and rebirth. Even gods could not escape it. He began to sense it in the trembling of the earth, the faint hum of the stars. The air whispered change. The prophecy was not a threat, it was an inevitability. And somewhere in the deep shadows of Mount Dicte, a secret flickered into being, a newborn hidden from his father's hunger. His name would be Zeus. Atlas did not yet know the child's name, nor the storm he would one day unleash. But that night, as he looked upon the horizon, the same horizon where heaven once touched earth, he felt the shift. A new age was beginning, and the wheel of fate was turning once more. He closed his eyes and whispered to the stars, "May balance find us again." But the heavens did not answer. They were holding their breath. For what had begun as one act of rebellion was about to birth another, greater, brighter, and far more terrible. Victory brings peace, but for how long in a world built on betrayal? The war was over. The sky, torn open by rebellion, had healed into calm blue silence. The Titans, once children of captivity, were now masters of creation. Their victory over Uranus marked the dawn of what mortals would later call the Golden Age, an age without pain, without hunger, without death. From his throne at the heart of the cosmos, Cronus ruled as king. His laughter rolled through the heavens like thunder softened by sunlight. Beside him sat Rhea, whose compassion balanced his growing pride. And around them, the Titans thrived, gods of light and storm, river and stone, law and chaos, each shaping their dominion with divine artistry. To mortals, the world seemed perfect. The crops grew without toil. The seas sang lullabies instead of rage. The stars glided across the heavens in harmony, like pearls on invisible strings. Time flowed gently, slow and circular, not yet burdened by decay. But even paradise, Atlas knew, carries its shadows. While the other Titans feasted, built palaces of gold, and bathed in the music of eternal day, Atlas remained watchful. From the western edge of the world, a realm where the sea kissed the horizon and light melted into shadow, he stood as guardian. It was said that beyond that horizon, the world's edge curved into nothingness. There, Atlas held his post, gazing out toward the unknown. He did not crave the splendor of Cronus's throne or the praises of immortals. What he sought was balance, that fragile, invisible harmony that holds creation together. Yet even as he searched for peace, he felt tremors deep within the earth, the restless heartbeat of Gaia. She had given the Titans their power, but she was not at rest. The memory of Uranus's fall, of her son's rebellion, had carved sorrow into her core. She could feel the pattern returning, a cycle that even gods could not escape. And in secret, she whispered again to her children. "The wheel turns, my sons. It always turns. What you took by the blade will one day be taken from you." Atlas heard it in the wind, faint but unmistakable. He felt it in the trembling of the mountains, in the sigh of the seas. The prophecy she spoke, that a child of Cronus would rise against his father, had not faded. It was growing stronger, like an echo carried by eternity. At first, Cronus dismissed the warning as myth. "No one shall rise against me," he declared before the gathered Titans. "I have ended tyranny. The cosmos bows to my will." But power changes the heart. The same pride that had corrupted Uranus now began to seat itself in Cronus. He became wary of the future, suspicious of even his own blood. And though Rhea's words sought to soothe him, the prophecy gnawed at him in the dark hours of the night. Atlas watched his brother's descent in silence. There was a stillness to him that others mistook for loyalty, but beneath that calm, the Titan of endurance was observing, learning. He could see that every age carries within it the seed of its opposite. The Golden Age glittered precisely because something darker waited beneath its surface. Meanwhile, the world blossomed. Mortals flourished under divine rule, their hearts untroubled, their lives long and joyful. They built temples not out of need but out of reverence. They sang of Cronus as the father of time, though they did not yet understand that time itself was his curse. Rivers flowed like veins of light, and trees bore fruit in every season. No one aged. No one fell ill. Even the stars seemed gentler, their glow soft as breath. It was a time of perfect balance, and yet Atlas could feel it slipping. He often wandered through the meadows at dusk, when the sun hung low and golden dust swirled through the air. There, he would look toward the east, where Cronus's palace glittered above the clouds, and murmured to himself. Peace that denies change is not peace at all. It is only sleep before awakening. In the stillness of twilight, he sometimes thought he heard the faint sound of a heartbeat, small, human, fragile. The sound of new life being hidden away. Rhea's secret. For while Cronus's hand ruled the cosmos, his fear ruled him. Each time Rhea bore him a child, he remembered his mother's prophecy, and in terror, he swallowed the newborn whole. One after another, the divine children vanished into darkness. Atlas saw the sorrow in Rhea's eyes when she visited his western domain. She came cloaked in dusk, her steps silent, her tears shining like dew. He devours them, Atlas, she whispered. Our children, his own flesh. The fear that freed us has made him its prisoner. Atlas turned toward the horizon, where the sea glowed like molten bronze. Fear is a chain stronger than iron, he said. Once bound by it, even a god cannot move. Rhea placed her hand upon his arm, desperate. Tell me, can fate be stopped? Atlas's gaze softened, but his answer was steady. Not stopped. Only carried. Those words sank into her heart like stone into water, and from them, the first act of defiance in the new age was born. Soon, she would give birth again, and this time, she would not surrender her child. But Atlas did not yet know that he would play a quiet, crucial part in what came next. The world around them still shimmered with abundance, unaware that beneath its golden skin, the cracks of destiny were spreading. The mortals sang. The rivers glowed. The gods laughed. But above it all, Atlas stood alone at the edge of the horizon, watching the slow turning of the world. He could feel the balance shifting again, the weight of the heavens growing restless, as if preparing for another fall. And as the sun sank beyond his watchtower, the golden light fading to blue, the Titan whispered a truth even the gods feared to name. Every golden age begins with a shadow. What prophecy could shake even those who ruled the stars? The golden age glimmered on the surface, radiant, eternal, serene. Yet beneath its beauty, something ancient began to stir. Prophecy, once whispered in the hidden roots of the earth, was now awakening in the open air. And it was Atlas, ever watchful, who first sensed the shift, a trembling not of stone, but of fate itself. The mountains groaned softly. The rivers carried strange murmurs. Even the stars, steady as they were, flickered for a breath too long. The world, perfect in its stillness, had started to breathe again, and with that breath came change. Atlas walked alone through the marble corridors of Mount Othries, where the Titans held council. The air there shimmered with divine power. From a distance, one could hear the laughter of Hyperion echoing like sunlight, and the rustle of Rhea's silken robes as she passed. But within those halls also lingered the cold scent of fear, fear disguised as pride. Cronus had grown darker. His eyes, once bright with triumph, now burned with suspicion. He held court among the Titans, proclaiming his eternal rule, yet his hand never left the sickle that had once felled Uranus. Every shadow was an omen. Every whisper, a threat. And that night, the oracle of Gaia, the voice of the earth itself, broke its long silence. The earth trembled softly beneath the Titan's feet. From the chasms of the deep, a low hum rose, ancient as creation. The air thickened, the wind stopped. The very fabric of the golden age paused to listen. Then, in a voice that seemed to speak through soil, through breath, through memory, came the words. The child of Cronus shall rise against him. As sky fell to earth, so shall the son to the Father's throne. Beware, for what is sown in fear shall harvest ruin. A shiver moved through the court. The Titans exchanged uneasy glances, yet none dared to speak, none except Atlas. He stepped forward, his deep voice steady, like the rumble of distant thunder. The prophecy is not punishment, he said. It is a reflection. We are the mirror of those we overthrew. If we gaze too long into that mirror, we will become it. But Cronus's pride was too great to hear wisdom. His gaze, sharp as lightning, turned to his brother. "You speak as though you pity Uranus," he hissed. Atlas met his eyes without fear. "I do not pity him. I only see that what we destroy in others, we awaken in ourselves." A tense silence followed. The Titans looked between them, uneasy. The words hung like smoke in the air, heavy, inescapable. Later, when the court had emptied, Rhea found Atlas standing alone at the balcony of the celestial halls, gazing toward the west. The sun melted into gold upon the ocean, painting the sky in soft amber hues. "You speak truths that wound him," she said gently. Atlas's tone was calm, almost sorrowful. "Truth always wounds before it heals." Rhea sighed. "He fears his children. Each birth fills him with terror. Gaia's prophecy haunts him even in his dreams." Atlas turned to her, his expression solemn. "And will you bear him more?" Her voice trembled. "I must. That is my nature. Creation does not ask permission to continue." For a moment, silence lingered between them, the silence of understanding shared by immortals who knew the cruelty of cycles. Atlas reached out, his massive hand brushing the marble railing, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "Then hide what must be hidden," he said. "Protect what must not be devoured. Every age needs one act of mercy to survive its own violence." Those words would echo in Rhea's mind for centuries. For though she did not yet know it, she would soon do exactly that. She would conceal her youngest child, Zeus, beneath the veil of the world. But before destiny could unfold, the Titans had to fall deeper into their illusion of peace. Cronus, desperate to deny the prophecy, sought counsel from the old earth once more. He descended into the cavern of echoes, where the remnants of Uranus's blood still stained the stone. There, in that dim crimson light, he demanded answers from the whispering darkness. "Tell me, Mother Earth, how do I stop the future?" And the voice replied, cold and knowing. "To stop the future is to stop the heartbeat of creation." But Cronus was not listening. He heard only what fear allowed him to hear. When he emerged from the caverns, his eyes gleamed with madness disguised as determination. "Then I shall consume the future," he declared. And so he did. Each child born to him, Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, Poseidon, he devoured, their divine essence swallowed into his immortal form. The heavens wept, the rivers recoiled. Gaia herself mourned. The golden age began to tarnish, its luster dimming under the weight of unspeakable fear. Atlas, though loyal, could no longer watch without despair. From his post at the western edge of the world, he felt the heavens tremble as each divine heartbeat was silenced. The harmony he had once guarded began to fracture. He raised his eyes to the stars, his voice a low prayer. "May one child be spared. May the pattern break before the world does." Far away, in secret, Rhea's heart heard that prayer. And when she bore her sixth child, she remembered the Titan's words. This time, she would not surrender. In the dead of night, as Cronus slept beneath the soundless sky, Rhea fled to the island of Crete. There, in a hidden cave, she gave birth to a boy whose cry echoed like thunder over the mountains. His name was Zeus. And in that moment, the first cry of the god who would challenge heaven itself, the universe shifted. Atlas, standing at the farthest edge of the world, felt it like a tremor through his bones. The stars quivered, the horizon deepened. Something vast and unstoppable had begun. He whispered to the winds, as if speaking to the newborn he had never seen. "Carry well, little one. The weight you will bear is greater than even mine." The prophecy had spoken. The wheel was turning again. And somewhere deep in his heart, Atlas knew, the age of Titans was already ending. Can foresight save a god from destiny, or only prepare him to endure it? The night was darker than any that had come before. Clouds veiled the stars, and the sea lay still as black glass. Deep in the folds of Mount Ida on the island of Crete, Rhea labored alone, her breaths shallow and trembling. Every shadow frightened her, every gust of wind sounded like her husband's approach. For if Cronus discovered what she was doing, if he learned of this child, the prophecy would be fulfilled before the child could even draw his second breath. She had done this 5 times before. 5 children stolen by her own husband's terror. 5 cries silenced in the darkness of his hunger. And now, as her 6th child came into the world, her heart beat with both dread and defiance. The boy's first cry pierced the stillness like lightning splitting a mountain. It was sharp, alive, commanding, the sound of something the world had never known. Zeus had been born, and with him, the turning of ages. Rhea looked upon him and saw in his eyes the glimmer of the very sky his father feared. She cradled him against her heart, whispering through tears, "You will not be devoured. The world still needs its future." But she could not keep him here. Cronus's gaze stretched far beyond Othrys, his paranoia knew no rest. Even the wind could carry betrayal. Rhea needed help, someone both strong and silent, someone who understood the balance between mercy and rebellion. And so she turned to the only Titan who had never betrayed his word, Atlas. He came when the earth itself whispered her need. From the western edge of the world, he crossed the seas in silence, his steps shaking the ocean floor. When he arrived, he found Rhea in the cave, the newborn wrapped in cloth of starlight. Rhea's voice trembled. "Brother, I have broken the law of fear. Will you stand against the king?" Atlas looked down at the child, whose tiny hand reached toward the shadows, grasping nothing, and yet, somehow, everything. His golden eyes softened. "I do not stand against," Atlas said quietly. "I stand for what must endure." He took the child in his vast hands, his touch as gentle as dawn. For a moment, the cave filled with light, faint and golden, as if the newborn drew warmth from the Titan's eternal strength. Outside, thunder rolled across the horizon. Cronus stirred in his sleep. The world held its breath. Rhea reached for a stone, cold and smooth, shaped by the river's patience. She wrapped it in the same cloth and placed it in Zeus's cradle. "He will believe this is our son," she whispered, her voice shaking. "When he swallows it, the prophecy will remain hidden." Atlas nodded. "Then let the earth deceive the sky once more." Before dawn, he carried the true child away, stepping between mountains and storms. The infant rested quietly against his chest, sensing no fear, only the rhythmic heartbeat of the Titan who carried him. When they reached the caves of Mount Dicte, hidden among the ridges of Crete, Atlas handed the child to the Curetes, divine guardians sworn to secrecy. These warriors would guard the boy with unending devotion, their shields clashing in rhythmic song to drown out his cries. And Amalthea, a gentle goat nymph, would nurse him with milk that shone like silver under the moon. Before he turned to leave, Atlas looked once more upon the child. He saw something there, not innocence, but promise. The same strength that he himself had once carried into rebellion, but tempered with something pure, balance, justice, the potential for renewal. He whispered, low and solemn, "When you rise, remember, even the heavens need holding." And with that, Atlas departed, disappearing once more into the west, where he belonged, the unseen keeper of the boundary between heaven and earth. Back in Othrys, dawn broke. Cronus awoke to Rhea's trembling hands offering the swaddled bundle. His eyes glowed with suspicion, his breath sharp. "Is it done?" he demanded. "Yes," she lied, "a son." Cronus tore the bundle from her grasp. Without hesitation, he opened his mouth and swallowed it whole. The sound echoed like thunder rolling through eternity. Rhea turned away, her heart breaking, not from the act itself, but from the cold satisfaction on her husband's face. The illusion was perfect. The deception complete. For now. Yet even as Cronus celebrated his false triumph, cracks began to form in his reign. The earth trembled softly, and rivers ran colder. The harmony that once filled the air faltered. Nature itself seemed to know that the lie would not last. Far away in the secret caves, the hidden child thrived. The Curides' shields rang day and night, and the sound, clashing bronze upon bronze, would one day become the thunder of Zeus's storms. He grew swiftly, nourished by divine milk and the earth's quiet blessings. His eyes mirrored the sky, his heart mirrored the justice the world had forgotten. Atlas, from his distant post, could feel the boy's strength like a pulse across the cosmos. It comforted him, yet also haunted him. For he knew the wheel was turning again. He had carried his mother's rebellion once. Now another son would rise to carry his. And though he did not know it, the same fate that had lifted him to power would soon press him beneath it. Atop Mount Othrys, Cronus began to dream uneasy dreams, of thunder in the distance, of lightning coiled like serpents, of chains breaking across the stars. And somewhere beneath those same stars, in a cave of stone and milk, the child of prophecy smiled for the first time. He did not yet know who he was, not yet the king of Olympus, not yet the one who would unseat the heavens. For now, he was only a heartbeat, small, steady, inevitable. Atlas stood at the world's farthest edge, feeling the tremor of destiny ripple through the firmament. He did not smile, nor did he despair. He simply whispered into the endless wind. The world breathes again. And the stars, faintly trembling, seemed to answer. What becomes of those who defy their own blood, and what price is paid for mercy disguised as rebellion? The air above the world was no longer still. The silence that once wrapped the heavens had begun to crack, not loudly, but with a slow, deep thunder that only the old gods could hear. The age of Titans was fading, though none dared say it aloud. Cronus ruled in splendor, yet shadows gathered behind his throne. His reign, born from rebellion, trembled beneath the weight of its own fear. And somewhere far from Mount Othrys, in a cave hidden by cloud and storm, Zeus had become a man. He was not the helpless child Cronus thought he had swallowed, but a god forged in secrecy, his heart tempered by justice, his will sharpened by silence. He had grown under the watchful eyes of the Curides, who trained him to strike fast, to think faster. The songs of his guardians had become hymns of thunder. The crash of their shields had become the rhythm of his destiny. Every sound of the storm echoed his birthright. When Zeus stood upon the cliffs of Crete for the first time, the wind itself seemed to bend to him. The sea churned not in anger, but in reverence. Lightning shimmered across the horizon, as if greeting a long-lost king. Yet for all his power, Zeus felt a weight he could not name, the unspoken inheritance of rebellion that ran through his blood. He sought counsel from the one who had once aided his mother, the Titan who watched from the edge of the world, Atlas. It was said that the western horizon burned gold when Atlas opened his eyes, and when Zeus came to him, the sea turned still. "You have your father's fire," Atlas said, his deep voice carrying over the waves. "And your grandfather's pride. Tell me, young one, what will you do with them?" Zeus bowed his head, though lightning still danced at his fingertips. "Free the world from fear," he said. Atlas studied him quietly. "And after fear is gone?" The young god hesitated. "Then peace." Atlas's expression darkened. "Peace does not follow power. It must be built from what power leaves behind." For a long moment, neither spoke. Only the sea moved, slow, endless, eternal. Atlas knew the pattern well. Every generation of gods believed it could end the cycle of violence. Every generation became the next link in the chain. Still, when Zeus asked for his aid, Atlas did not refuse. Somewhere deep in his heart, the Titan hoped that this time might be different, that the world might finally find its balance. And so, the quiet alliance was born. Together, they traveled across the lands, awakening those who had been buried by Cronus's reign. From the caverns of Tartarus, Zeus released the Cyclopes, who had once been banished for their strange power. In gratitude, they forged for him the lightning, the first weapon of the heavens, a spear of living fire that could split the sky itself. He freed, too, the Centimanes, the hundred-handed ones, whose strength could shake mountains. They had known only darkness and chains, yet when Zeus spoke, they listened, not to his command, but to his promise. "Fight with me," he said, "and the sky will belong to all who can bear its light." They answered with a roar that made the stars quiver. Meanwhile, Cronus felt the world shifting beneath his feet. His dreams filled with flashes of storm and flame. His heart, once proud, began to beat faster, the pulse of fear returning. He called upon his siblings, commanding them to prepare for war. The Titanomachy, the war of the heavens, had begun. The first strike came not from Olympus, which did not yet exist, but from the earth itself. The mountains groaned and split open. Rivers boiled. The sky darkened as the armies of the Titans assembled under Cronus's banner. They were vast, ancient, and unyielding, beings of stone and storm, of unending endurance. And at their front stood Atlas, unwillingly, unavoidably. He had pledged loyalty to balance, not to tyranny, but when the call of blood came, even he could not deny it. Cronus's voice echoed through his mind, not as command, but as memory. "You are my brother, Atlas. Stand beside me, and no god shall ever overthrow us." So Atlas stood, not out of devotion, but out of duty. His heart was divided, torn between the order he sought and the destiny he foresaw. From the east came Zeus, radiant and young, his thunder cracking across the mountains. Behind him marched the liberated, gods, monsters, and the newly awakened forces of creation. The heavens shook as the first bolts of lightning met the Titan spears. The clash was unlike anything the cosmos had ever seen. Mountains shattered. Stars fell like rain. Oceans rose in walls of fury. Each blow carried the weight of eternity. Atlas fought with unmatched might, his every movement echoing like the strike of an earthquake. Yet for every blow he delivered, a whisper haunted him, "What am I upholding? The sky, or the cycle?" The Titans roared in unity, but their strength, though ancient, was fading. For 10 years, the war raged on, a war not only of power, but of meaning. Zeus's lightning became the symbol of the new age, piercing through the clouds of Cronus's dominion. One by one, the old gods faltered. Hyperion fell beneath a storm of fire. Ceus was driven into the depths. Even mighty Crius was cast down into the sea. And still, Atlas stood. He held the line at the western front, the boundary between night and day. For every wave of Zeus's thunder, he answered with the force of mountains. But in his heart, something was breaking. He could feel that the world was changing, that his strength was being spent not to preserve, but to delay the inevitable. As he looked toward the horizon, where lightning split the sky in half, Atlas felt the truth sink into his bones. The war was not about victory or vengeance. It was about who could bear the weight of creation next. When the final battle came, the air itself burned. Zeus's voice thundered above the chaos. "Father, your time is done." And from the ruins of heaven, Cronus answered with a roar. "Then come take it, boy." Between them, Atlas fought, not for one, not for the other, but for the fragile balance between them. Yet even he could not hold forever. The storm of generations had begun, and no Titan, no matter how mighty, could stand against the turning of fate. The sky trembled. The stars blinked. And in that trembling light, the world prepared to witness the fall of the old order. How does a god measure loyalty when both sides call him brother? The war between the Titans and the Olympians did not last a season, nor a century, but 10 long years, 10 years in which the sky itself bled lightning and the earth groaned beneath the weight of gods. Every mountain, every ocean, every gust of wind became a battlefield. And in that endless struggle, Atlas became both legend and warning, the Titan who could not yield. When mortals later looked up at the constellations, they would never know how much of their peace was built on those 10 years of divine ruin. For the heavens themselves had been torn apart, a chaos of fire and stone that raged without end. The Titanomachy began with blinding light. From the east came Zeus, his thunderbolts cleaving the sky like divine judgment. Behind him marched the new gods, fierce, radiant, filled with youth's certainty. Poseidon commanded the seas as his trident churned the depths. Hades split the ground with the shadows of the dead. Hera, Demeter, and Hestia, newly freed from their father's stomach, wielded powers that even the Titans had never known. From the west rose the older might, the Titans of creation itself. Cronus, his blade flashing with the memory of Uranus's fall, led his siblings into the storm. Around him thundered Iapetus, Hyperion, Ceus, Crius, and at the front of them all, Atlas, his form towering, his eyes burning like dying suns. When the two forces met upon the plain of Phlegra, the world cracked open. Mountains split, oceans boiled, and rivers changed their courses forever. Lightning met stone, immortality met endurance. And for every blow, Atlas was there, not as king, not as tyrant, but as the force that made both heaven and earth tremble. The Olympians feared him most. He did not boast or rage. He simply endured, catching Zeus's lightning with his bare hands, hurling mountains as shields, holding back Poseidon's waves as if they were mist. Each clash sent shockwaves across creation. The constellations blinked, and time itself hesitated. But even Atlas could feel the wear of eternity. His strength was vast, yet it had limits, limits that Zeus, with his cunning, began to sense. The younger gods were not stronger than the Titans, but they were faster, lighter, and united by something their elders had lost: purpose. The Titans fought to preserve power, the Olympians fought to redefine it. And somewhere between those ideals, Atlas stood alone. On the 5th year of the war, Atlas met Zeus upon the shattered peaks of Mount Orthres. The battle between them became the heartbeat of the war itself. Zeus hurled bolts of lightning that tore the sky apart. Atlas caught them in his hands and slammed them into the earth, where they became rivers of fire. "You fight with your father's fear," Atlas thundered. "And you fight with your mother's sorrow," Zeus answered. Each strike was a question, each parry a prophecy. For hours, they clashed until even the stars hid their eyes. Finally, a storm broke that silenced both armies, a storm not of weather, but of time itself. The air trembled, then fell still. When it cleared, Zeus stood alone upon the peak. Atlas had fallen to one knee, not from defeat, but from realization. The war was not about strength. It was about who could carry the future's weight. And Zeus, young, reckless, yet unbroken, carried it without hesitation. Atlas rose, his chest heaving, his skin scorched by divine fire. For a moment, the two gods simply looked at one another, a silent exchange between generations. Then, without a word, Atlas stepped back into the fray. Years passed, each one echoing with ruin. The Titans' unity began to crumble. Hyperion, once radiant, fell to his own pride. Iapetus was struck down by his son, Prometheus, who had chosen Zeus's cause. Cronus, the king of time, felt his power falter as time itself began to move without him. Even the earth, their mother, could no longer bear their rage. Gaia's cries split the heavens, and from her sorrow came new monsters, Typhon and Echidna, born of chaos and vengeance. Yet even they could not turn the tide. By the 9th year, the Titans had been pushed to the brink. The sky hung torn and weary, heavy with smoke. The ocean roared with blood. Atlas stood at the final line of defense, his feet planted, his arms raised, his voice roaring above the storm. If the heavens fall, the world dies with them. It was not loyalty that kept him fighting now. It was purpose. If the Titans lost, someone must still hold the sky. Someone must keep heaven from crushing the earth. Zeus understood this, and in that understanding lay respect. But mercy had no place in war. On the 10th year, the final battle came. The Olympians, wielding their new order, descended upon Mount Orthres. Zeus called upon the Cyclopes and the 100-handed ones. From the depths of Tartarus, they hurled boulders the size of mountains, shaking the stars from their places. Cronus fell first, his sickle shattered, his rein undone. One by one, the Titans were bound in chains forged from unbreakable light. Their roars shook eternity, but no one came to free them. All except Atlas. He did not beg. He did not yield. When Zeus approached, lightning still burning across his shoulders, Atlas lifted his gaze and said, "So it ends, as it must. The burden returns to the strong." Zeus looked upon him, not as enemy, but as mirror. "Yes," he said softly. "And you shall bear it." The thunder faded. The armies fell silent. In that quiet, the fate of Atlas was sealed. The war had ended, but its echo would never fade. For victory demands sacrifice, and even gods must decide who will carry the sky. What happens when endurance meets eternity's end, and the sky itself demands a bearer? The 10th year of war ended not with triumph, but with silence, a silence so deep it seemed to swallow the world. The smoke of 1,000 storms drifted into the heavens, veiling the stars that had watched gods destroy their own kind. The mountains that once sang with the footsteps of titans now stood cracked and hollow. The age of the old gods had ended. The titans, those beings of unyielding might, were defeated. Their roars, once capable of shaking continents, faded into echoes beneath the earth. Zeus had risen from the ashes of the old world, lightning still dancing upon his skin, the storm his crown. But victory came with a price, and even the heavens trembled under the weight of what must be done next. Zeus stood upon the shattered summit of Mount Orthres, the fortress that had once been Cronus' throne. Around him, the new gods gathered. Poseidon, still smelling of salt and storm. Hades, his eyes shadowed by the silence of the dead. Hera, Demeter, and Hestia, standing beside him as the last traces of the Golden Age dissolved into memory. Below them, bound in chains of adamantine light, lay the defeated Titans, Cronus, Hyperion, Iapetus, and the others. They were vast, monstrous even in defeat, their skin scorched by fire and thunder. Yet there was one who did not bow, one who still met the eyes of the new king without fear, Atlas. The battlefield still smelled of ozone and ash. The ground beneath Atlas's feet steamed, molten rivers flowing between the cracks. But he stood straight, his chest rising with each slow, defiant breath. The other titans cursed Zeus, roared against their fate. Atlas did not. He only stared into the horizon, the same horizon he had guarded since the dawn of time. When Zeus approached, the air shimmered. The lightning in his veins quieted, as if even it respected the titan's stillness. "Atlas," Zeus said, his voice steady but heavy with judgment. "You stood against me when I sought to free the world from tyranny." "I stood for the balance your war destroyed," Atlas replied. "Not for Cronus. Not for rebellion. For the space between." Zeus's gaze softened for a breath, then hardened. "Balance requires a pillar, not a warrior. The heavens are heavy, and now someone must bear them." For a moment, the world itself seemed to hold its breath. Even the winds paused, uncertain of what the king of Olympus meant. Atlas's brow furrowed. "You speak of punishment." Zeus nodded. "Not punishment. Order." And then the decree fell like thunder across eternity. "Let Atlas, the steadfast one, the endurance of the old world, bear the weight of the sky, not as torment, but as balance eternal. Let him hold heaven apart from earth, so that chaos may never close them again." A tremor rippled through the world. The earth groaned, the heavens shivered. The very fabric of reality shifted, accepting the judgment. Atlas did not plead. He did not curse. He simply looked up, where the stars flickered faintly beyond the storm clouds. His voice was quiet, but it carried through every realm. "If this is the burden the world requires, then let it be mine." And with that, the transformation began. The ground beneath him cracked open, glowing with the fire of creation. The air grew heavy, pressing down upon his shoulders like a collapsing sky. Slowly, the heavens themselves bent, vast, shimmering, alive, and descended toward him. The stars screamed in their courses. The constellations rippled like waves. Atlas dropped to one knee, his arms rising. The weight was unimaginable, not just physical, but cosmic. It was the pull of gravity, the hum of time, the eternal pressure of heaven against earth. The burden that no god, no mortal, had ever felt. And yet, he did not fall. The clouds parted, revealing his colossal silhouette, arms stretched wide, muscles carved from light and stone, the dome of the sky resting upon his shoulders. The Titans fell silent. Even Zeus could not speak. In that moment, Atlas ceased to be warrior or rebel. He became structure. From that day forward, heaven and earth were kept apart by his endurance. The stars revolved around him. The winds shifted to his breath. Every dawn rose and every night fell upon the strength of his resolve. But though the heavens were now stable, peace did not come easily. Deep within the abyss of Tartarus, Zeus cast the remaining Titans, bound in chains forged by the Cyclopes, guarded by the hundred-handed ones. Their cries echoed through the underworld, shaking the roots of mountains. Cronus's voice, bitter and hollow, called out from the darkness. "You have not destroyed us, brother. You have only buried us beneath the weight of your fear." But Zeus turned away. His reign had begun. From Olympus, the new mountain throne carved from the bones of victory, Zeus looked down upon the world and up toward the sky. There, at the farthest edge of the horizon, he could see the faint outline of Atlas's form, vast, unmoving, eternal. Poseidon approached. Will he endure it? Zeus's eyes flickered like lightning. He already has. And so, while the other Titans screamed in the abyss, Atlas remained above, not in darkness, but in endless twilight, the border between night and day. He was the only Titan not cast into Tartarus, yet his fate was no less severe. He was both prisoner and pillar, cursed and sacred. Ages would pass, and mortals would look upon mountains and mistake their peaks for his shoulders. Sailors would follow the stars he held in place. And scholars, centuries later, would speak his name not as curse, but as symbol, the eternal bearer, the strength that upholds all creation. The old gods had fallen, but through Atlas, their endurance lived on. And far below, in the quiet dark of Tartarus, Cronus whispered with bitter awe. "The one who held our cause now holds our sky. What punishment fits the one who tried to hold up the heavens, and what does it mean to become the weight itself? There are punishments that break a body, and there are punishments that shape eternity." Atlas received the latter. The battlefield was gone now. The world was quiet again, but it was not peace. It was aftermath, that strange stillness when even the gods are afraid to breathe. The smoke of war had thinned, and in its place hung something heavier, the silence of consequence. At the farthest western edge of the earth, where the sun sinks into the ocean and the sea bleeds into night, Atlas knelt. Beneath him, the ground smoldered, above him, the dome of heaven pressed down with the full weight of creation. It was not a symbol, not a metaphor. It was literal, the sky itself had descended upon him. The constellations trembled on his shoulders like living fire. The air grew thick and electric, bending to his form. He tried to stand, but the heavens were heavier than thought, denser than matter, filled with the gravity of stars and the memory of every god's voice. His legs sank into the rock. His breath became the wind. His sweat became the rain. His silence became the law that kept heaven and earth apart. And so the age of Atlas began, not of rule, but of endurance. The Olympians returned to Olympus. The world was theirs now, and order had been restored. Yet even in victory, Zeus could not forget the sight of the Titan's bowed head beneath the sky. The image haunted him, as if Atlas had become a mirror of his own throne, one high, one low, both bearing the weight of heaven. Meanwhile, mortals began to speak of a new mountain in the west. They said it was taller than any before, touching the stars, crowned in mist and sorrow. Some called it the pillar of the world. Others, the tomb of a god. But the wise knew its name, Atlas. Each night, the stars turned slowly above him. At first, they were chaotic, scattered remnants of the war. But in time, they began to follow the rhythm of his breath, the first celestial order. Day and night, light and dark, found balance again. And yet, balance was a cruel teacher. Atlas's arms trembled for the first 100 years. The muscles that had once hurled mountains strained under a weight beyond flesh. His immortal body did not bleed, but his spirit did, bleeding in silence, in thought, in memory. He remembered the beginning, the laughter of his brothers, the softness of Rhea's voice, the shimmering peace of the Golden Age. He remembered the smell of lightning during the war, the sight of Cronus falling, the gaze of Zeus when judgment was given. He had fought for balance, and now he had become it. At times, the winds carried the voices of the other titans from Tartarus, faint, distant, like ghosts beneath the sea. They called to him. "Brother! Help us! You still walk the earth, free us!" Atlas did not answer. For what was freedom, if all things depended on his captivity? And sometimes, when the stars grew too heavy and the silence too loud, he whispered to the void. "Mother Earth, do you see what your children have become?" From deep below, Gaia's voice answered only once. "Yes, my son. The world endures because you do." That was all she said. That was all he needed to hear. Time, now truly flowing under Zeus's reign, began to move like water. Seasons were born. Mortals learned to count the days by the dance of stars across Atlas's shoulders. Ages came and went, and still, he stood. His punishment became the world's rhythm. His suffering became its stability. Sometimes, the gods would visit him, not out of pity, but curiosity. Hermes, fleet and silver-tongued, once asked, "Does it hurt, old Titan?" Atlas looked at him, his eyes dim but steady. "Only when I remember that I was free." The messenger fell silent. Another time, Poseidon approached, his trident glimmering with the pull of the tides. "You bear heaven," he said. "I bear the sea. Which is heavier, I wonder?" Atlas smiled faintly, the first and last smile he would ever give. "The weight you choose is never as heavy as the one you are given." Poseidon did not answer. He simply bowed his head and left. Even Zeus, from his lofty throne, sometimes looked westward in quiet reflection. Though he had condemned Atlas, he understood him better than anyone else. For in his own way, Zeus too carried a burden, the burden of kingship, of holding chaos at bay. Once, in the first century of his rule, he descended to where Atlas stood and spoke quietly. "Does the sky still tremble?" Atlas's voice rolled like distant thunder. "It does. But it learns." Zeus nodded slowly. "Then we are alike." Atlas said nothing more, and the king of Olympus departed, a god haunted by the strength of the one he had bound. And so centuries became millennia. Moss grew upon the Titan's feet, rivers carved paths around his knees, and the peaks of mountains shaped themselves after his form. Mortals came to believe the world rested upon his back. In truth, it rested upon his resolve. Each sunset, when the last gold of the day sank into the sea, Atlas would look toward the horizon and whisper the same words. "Endure." And somehow, the stars obeyed. The sky he held no longer felt like punishment. It felt like purpose. The weight did not crush him, it defined him. For without his endurance, heaven would fall, without his silence, chaos would return. Atlas had become the still point of all creation. He was no longer just a Titan. He was the law between all things. And yet, deep within that infinite stillness, one question remained, a whisper that even time could not erase. Was Atlas truly cursed, or was he the foundation of the world's harmony? Ages passed, and the sound of battle faded into legend. The cries of Titans in Tartarus were now only faint tremors beneath the earth. Olympus thrived above, filled with laughter, feasts, and thunder. Yet beyond the reach of song and glory, at the farthest edge of the known world, one figure remained unmoving, the Titan who had become the pillar of all creation. Atlas. He stood where day met night, where sea met sky. His feet were buried in the earth, his shoulders pressed beneath the heavens, and his eyes, though open, stared into the endless horizon. The world below changed with time, empires rose, oceans shifted, mountains eroded, but Atlas remained the same. Immortal, motionless, eternal. The gods forgot him. Mortals turned him into myth. Yet without his endurance, the very balance of the universe would collapse. In the beginning, there had been pain, the crushing ache of a burden that no being was meant to bear. The heavens were not still, they moved, they pulsed, they resisted. Every star tugged in its orbit, every planet whispered with gravity. The sky was alive, and Atlas could feel its every motion. The constellations burned into his shoulders like brands. The Milky Way stretched across his spine like a scar. At first, he had tried to fight it, to push back, to resist. But in doing so, he nearly tore the heavens apart. And so, over centuries, he learned the only lesson eternity teaches, not to fight the weight, but to flow with it. He began to move with the stars, slow, steady, almost imperceptible. His breath became the rhythm of the cosmos. When he exhaled, the seasons turned. When he blinked, the tides shifted. When he sighed, the wind carried across the oceans. And in that stillness, something strange began to happen. The pain dulled. It never left, but it changed, it became meaning. Atlas no longer thought of punishment. He no longer thought of Zeus or rebellion or even the war that had cost him everything. The past faded into a distant echo. Only the present remained, the sound of the wind, the glow of the stars, the heartbeat of the world he supported. But even gods are not immune to loneliness. The earth below was alive with mortals, children of clay who built cities, who looked up at the stars and wondered what held them. They prayed to Zeus, Poseidon, Apollo, but to Atlas, they offered silence. They did not know his story. They only felt his presence, the invisible stillness that kept their world from falling apart. Sometimes, when the night was clearest, he would hear their faint songs drifting upward. He could not smile, but his heart, buried beneath stone and divinity, softened. These fragile beings, they did not know it, but their lives were balanced upon his endurance. Once every age, a wandering god would come to visit him. Hermes, curious as always, was the first. He appeared in a flash of silver light, hovering before Atlas's massive face like a spark before a mountain. "It's lonely here, isn't it?" the messenger said softly. Atlas's voice rumbled like distant thunder. "Lonely is not always sorrow. It is space. And space keeps the world from collapsing." Hermes tilted his head, thoughtful. "Do you ever wish to be free?" Atlas's eyes glimmered faintly. "Freedom is movement. But I move all things by standing still." The young god fell silent. He left an offering, a simple laurel branch, and departed into the wind. Later, Prometheus, the titan of foresight, came in secret. He had escaped his own torment briefly, the eagle's shadow still following him. Standing before his chained brother, he whispered, "Do you hate them, Atlas? The gods who did this?" Atlas looked down, his expression unreadable. "No. Hate is a fire that consumes the bearer first. I cannot burn, I can only bear." Prometheus nodded, eyes heavy with sorrow. "Then you are the truest god of all." After that, even he did not return. Centuries rolled into millennia. Rain carved valleys at Atlas's feet. Forests grew around his knees. Snow gathered in the creases of his arms. To mortals, he had become the mountain range itself. They climbed his slopes, unaware they were scaling the limbs of a living god. They built altars on his shoulders, thinking them peaks of stone. Each dawn, when the sun rose across the curve of the world, its light touched his face first. The warmth reminded him that time still moved, not for him, but through him. And at night, when the stars shone brightest, he could see his reflection in them, fragments of his endurance scattered across the heavens. He was not forgotten by the universe, even if the world no longer spoke his name. Sometimes, when the loneliness became too heavy, Atlas would speak to the sky itself. "Are you still angry with me?" he would ask. And in answer, the stars would shimmer softly, as if whispering, "No. We rest because you hold us." That was enough. Through the stillness, Atlas began to understand something deeper than even Zeus could comprehend, that endurance is not defiance, it is devotion. To bear the sky was not punishment. It was participation in the order of all things. His silence was service. His suffering was stability. He no longer wished for release. He no longer envied the gods in their feasts or the mortals in their fleeting lives. His purpose was infinite, and infinity has no envy. He had become what all creators seek and few achieve, the center that never moves. And yet, deep within his immortal stillness, there lingered one small ache, not of pain, but of memory. The ache of connection, the echo of a world that once laughed, fought, and breathed beside him. He could endure eternity, but he could never again feel the warmth of companionship. A single tear, born not of sorrow but of remembrance, slipped from his eye. As it fell, it turned to a river, the first of many that would carve the lands of the West. Mortals would one day call it Atlantis' stream, believing it divine. They would be right. Because in that tear was everything, memory, endurance, and love for a world that would never know the name of the one who held it steady. Can a being who holds the sky ever find freedom within, or is freedom itself the art of endurance? For a time that cannot be measured, not by sun, nor moon, nor even the stars that rested upon his shoulders, Atlas stood alone. Yet even eternity finds ways to bloom in the cracks of sorrow. Though the Titan was bound to silence, his story did not end with solitude. From endurance came legacy. From stillness, creation. For even beneath the weight of the heavens, Atlas remained alive, a being of immense power and endless vitality. The sky rested upon him, yes, but life still flowed through his veins like molten gold. The winds that brushed his face carried whispers from the earth below, and within those whispers, love found its way back to him. And so, from the quiet strength of his being, daughters were born. They were not born of passion or flesh, but of essence, manifestations of the Titan's endurance given form. From his unyielding patience came the radiant Pleiades, from his watchful solitude came the gentle Hesperides. Together, they would become the light that shimmered at the edges of night, the soft reminder that even under the heaviest burden, beauty can still emerge. The Pleiades were 7 in number: Maia, Electra, Teogide, Alcyone, Seleno, Sterope, and Merope. Each reflected a fragment of their father's soul. Maia carried his wisdom, Electra, his quiet fire, Teogide, his discipline, Alcyone, his calm, Seleno, his endurance, Sterope, his strength, and Merope, his compassion. They danced across the heavens, trailing silver light like tears frozen into starlight. Their laughter, soft, melodic, became the echo of the constellations. When mortals looked up at night, they saw the 7 sisters and whispered, "There, the daughters of the Titan who holds the sky." But not all his children lived among the stars. The Hesperides, daughters of twilight, remained closer to the earth, guardians of the golden edge where day gives birth to night. They tended to a divine garden at the westernmost horizon, a sanctuary of eternal dusk where sunlight turned to honey and the air shimmered with the scent of immortality. There, in that hidden grove, trees bore apples of solid gold, fruit said to grant eternal life. The Hesperides sang to them, their voices weaving the light of the setting sun into lullabies that soothed even the restless stars. This garden would become both legend and temptation, for no mortal or god could gaze upon its beauty without feeling the ache of longing. It was a fragment of paradise, untouched, unspoiled, eternal. And at its borders, unseen yet ever present, their father watched. Though bound beneath the sky, Atlas's presence reached his daughters through the wind. When the breeze rustled the leaves of the golden trees, it was his voice. When the twilight deepened into violet hues, it was the reflection of his gaze. To the Hesperides, their father was not a prisoner, but a guardian. To the Pleiades, he was not a forgotten relic, but the reason the stars moved in harmony. Through them, his spirit flowed into every horizon, every constellation, every soft edge between light and dark. Even Zeus, watching from Olympus, could not deny the beauty of what Atlas had created through his endurance. The king of the gods once said to Hera, "Perhaps the sky rests lighter upon him because it loves the daughters it bore." Hera, ever sharp, replied, "No. It rests lighter because he no longer resists its weight." But the heavens did not rest lightly for long. For though Atlas found meaning in the serenity of his children, the world beyond his watch was restless. Heroes would soon rise, quests would begin, and mortals, ever curious, ever daring, would once again reach for things forbidden. For now, though, the story remained tranquil, a lull in the storm. The daughters of Atlas thrived. The Hesperides garden glowed in the western light. The Pleiades illuminated the path of sailors lost at sea. And beneath it all, their father bore his eternal duty in silence, his heart beating to the rhythm of their grace. Sometimes, when the night was clearest, Maia, eldest of the Pleiades, would pause in her dance and whisper to her sisters, "Can he see us?" And from the horizon below, the wind would answer softly, "Always." Their light would shimmer brighter then, and mortals would mistake it for the flicker of a storm's birth, not knowing that it was joy, not thunder. One night, a mortal shepherd named Orion gazed upon the Pleiades with a heart too full of wonder. He chased their light across the heavens, seeking to possess what could not be held. The sisters fled, their laughter echoing across the vault of the sky, until Zeus himself, moved by pity, placed them forever among the stars to keep them beyond mortal reach. Thus, even in stillness, Atlas's family grew. The heavens that once punished him became his lineage's home, his daughters woven into the very firmament he held aloft. But beneath the beauty of this new order, a question began to stir in the fabric of fate. If even Atlas's burden could give rise to light, what might happen when mortal desire reached the gates of his daughter's golden garden? The Hesperides realm gleamed at the world's western edge, the same place where Atlas's feet were rooted, where the sky and sea merged into infinity. Soon, this paradise would draw the gaze of gods and heroes alike. And among them would come one destined to test both Atlas's endurance and his heart. For even eternity, it seemed, could not remain untouched by the hands of mortals. Can legacy redeem suffering, or does love, too, carry its own kind of weight? Beyond the reach of mortal maps, where the sky bleeds into the sea and time itself seems to hesitate, lies a place whispered of in dreams, the garden at the edge of the world. It was here that the daughters of Atlas, the Hesperides, tended to a paradise untouched by decay, unseen by all but the gods. A realm of gold and twilight, its beauty was said to lull even the winds into silence. From his eternal post beneath the heavens, Atlas watched over it, though he could never enter. His form loomed beyond the horizon, half shadow, half light, the unseen guardian of the last perfect thing left in the world. The garden was a living poem. Trees dripped with sunlight frozen into fruit, streams ran with water so pure it sang when it moved. Each dusk, the sky folded gently upon it, casting a glow that never truly faded, a perpetual sunset that blurred the line between day and night. And among the amber leaves, the Hesperides danced, their laughter weaving through the air like music older than time. At the heart of the grove stood the tree of golden apples, a gift, it was said, from Gaia herself to the goddess Hera as a token of eternal union with Zeus. The fruit shimmered with divine power, granting immortality to any who dared taste it. Yet to guard such a treasure required more than beauty. It required vigilance. It required balance. Thus, at the border between sky and earth, Atlas bore his burden, ensuring that no mortal, no god, and no creature from beyond would disturb the delicate harmony of this sacred place. The garden's peace depended on him, for should his attention waver, should the heavens tilt or the earth rise, even paradise could collapse. But the world beyond paradise never rests. Heroes were stirring in the east, and one of them, a man born of both mortal fragility and divine blood, was already fated to seek what no one should touch. Heracles. Yet before his coming, the garden lived undisturbed for countless ages. Each dawn, the Hesperides sang to their father from afar. "The sky glows warmer today, father," one would say. "Is it joy that stirs in the heavens?" Atlas would answer through the wind, his voice deep but gentle. "The heavens move because they must, not because they rejoice. Yet in your laughter, even they find rest." The sisters smiled at that. They knew his burden, but not his loneliness. In their eyes, he was not a prisoner, but a god of stillness, the living pillar upon which beauty itself was built. At night, when the stars reflected in the golden apples, the garden glowed like a sea of suns. Mortals who glimpsed it from distant ships believed it to be the edge of creation, the threshold where the world ended and eternity began. Poets called it the Western Dream. Sailors called it the land beyond dusk. But to the gods, it was simply home's farthest memory, the last fragment of the golden age that still survived. Yet even paradise is not immune to longing. The Hesperides, though divine, often gazed beyond their garden's borders, at the endless ocean, the horizon where their father's silhouette stood unmoving beneath the stars. "Why must he bear it alone?" they would whisper. The eldest, Egli, answered softly, "Because without his burden, even our light would fall." Still, their hearts ached. They tended the apples not only for duty, but in quiet hope, that one day their father might be freed, that the sky might learn to hold itself. But the heavens are heavy things, and hope alone cannot lift them. Sometimes, when the air grew still and the sea calmed, a faint tremor rippled through the garden, the pulse of Atlas's breath beneath the world. The sisters would kneel, pressing their hands into the soil, feeling his heartbeat through the roots. "We are here," they would whisper. "And I hear you," the wind would reply. It was their ritual, their sacred exchange between movement and stillness. But far away, in the realm of heroes, Zeus's son was being tested. Heracles, weary from his labors, had already conquered beasts, crossed deserts, and wrestled death itself. Now, his 11th task would bring him west, to steal one of the golden apples of the Hesperides. Even the gods murmured at the audacity of the challenge. To trespass upon Atlas's domain was to tempt eternity itself. And yet, fate delights in paradox. For Heracles, though mortal in form, carried the strength of the gods in his blood, and, unknowingly, the same endurance that defined the Titan he was about to meet. But before destiny could bring them face to face, the world seemed to hold a collective breath. The wind slowed. The stars shimmered. Even the golden leaves trembled in anticipation. The sisters felt it, that subtle shift in the air that precedes change. Something, or someone, was coming. Atlas felt it too. Though the weight upon his shoulders never changed, the world beneath it did. A new energy hummed through the earth, bold, human, impatient. It was a rhythm unlike the timeless heartbeat of the gods. And for the first time in ages, Atlas spoke not to the stars, but to himself. "The sons of men have grown brave. Brave enough to seek what the gods guard." The wind sighed across his face, carrying with it the faint scent of the east, sweat, fire, iron, and willpower. The age of heroes was approaching, and with it, the first footsteps of the mortal who would dare to ask a Titan to set the sky down. The story of Atlas was not over. The burden of the heavens would soon be tested, not by rebellion, but by a bargain. And far beyond the western sea, the thunder of a demigod's march echoed closer with every sunrise. What happens when paradise is guarded by punishment, and a mortal dares to walk through its gates? For countless ages, the edge of the world remained untouched, the domain of Atlas and his daughters, a place of twilight and gold. No mortal feet had ever crossed its sands. But fate, relentless and cunning, was stirring once more. Across the lands of men, a new sound began to echo, the measured tread of a demigod. His name was Heracles, son of Zeus and a mortal woman, Alcmene. Born of divine blood and mortal flesh, he carried strength unlike any before him, strength that could split mountains, yet a heart burdened by guilt. For every miracle he performed, every monster he slew, his soul grew heavier with the memory of the madness Hera had cursed upon him. In a frenzy not his own, he had slain those he loved most. And so, his 12 labors were not a path to glory, but to forgiveness. Now, after conquering the impossible, 11 trials behind him, only 2 remained. His next task would lead him farther than any mortal had ever gone, to the garden of the Hesperides, and the golden apples of the gods. The journey west was long and perilous. He crossed deserts where the air shimmered like liquid fire, climbed mountains whose peaks scraped the clouds, and sailed seas where the horizon never seemed to move. Each night, the stars guided him, the same stars Atlas held aloft. As he traveled, stories of the Titan reached him through whispers of wind and legend. Some said Atlas was a monster carved from stone, cursed for pride. Others claimed he was the pillar that held the cosmos itself, the last remnant of the old order. But Heracles did not believe in legends. He believed in truth, and truth, he knew, was never as it seemed. At last, after moons without count, he came to the lands of Hyperborea, the threshold of the known world. The air there was different, thick with a silence so complete it felt alive. The sky was vast, endless, heavy. Even the light seemed to bend under its weight. He felt it before he saw it, that pressure in the air, as though the heavens themselves were being held back by an unseen force. Then, through the haze of eternal dusk, he saw him. Atlas. The Titan's form rose from the horizon like a mountain given breath. His skin was the color of storm clouds, his shoulders broad enough to cradle the constellations. Lightning flickered faintly across the veins of his arms, tracing the living map of the heavens he bore. The sky curved upon him, not as punishment, but as purpose. Heracles stood frozen. No beast, no god, no nightmare had ever filled him with such awe. For a long while, he said nothing. Then, bowing his head, he spoke. "Great Atlas, I am Heracles, son of Zeus. I come seeking your counsel, and your aid." Atlas did not answer. His eyes, vast and calm as the sea, regarded the mortal before him. When he finally spoke, his voice rumbled through the air like the shifting of tectonic plates. "Aid," he said. "You stand before the weight of the heavens and ask it for help." Heracles met the gaze without flinching. Not the heavens, only their bearer. The faintest hint of amusement touched the Titan's lips. It was the first smile the world had seen from him in 1,000 years. "You are brave," Atlas said. "Or foolish. Tell me, son of Zeus, what is it you seek that lies in my daughter's care?" "The golden apples of the Hesperides," Heracles replied. "They are the key to my penance, my 11th labor. Without them, I cannot be free." At that, Atlas's expression darkened. "Freedom," he repeated, the word heavy with irony. "Do you know what freedom costs, mortal?" Heracles took a step closer. "I have paid it in blood and loss." "Then you have paid only the beginning." The Titan's voice softened, though it still carried the rumble of eternity. "The apples you seek are not prizes. They are promises, of immortality, of divine peace. But those who reach for them often lose what makes them worthy of either." Heracles clenched his fists. "Then I will reach and lose, but I will not stop." Atlas studied him for a long moment. The demigod's resolve stirred something deep within him, a faint echo of his own rebellion, long buried beneath ages of stillness. "Very well," he said at last. "If your heart is strong enough to stand before the weight of gods, then you may earn what you seek. But the garden is beyond mortal reach. I alone may walk there." Heracles frowned. "Then how can I complete my task?" Atlas's gaze lowered to the horizon. "Perhaps, for once, the burden can be shared." The sky trembled. A gust of wind swept through the valley. The air grew thick, as if listening. "I will fetch the apples for you," the Titan said. "But you, mortal, you must take my place while I do." The words hung between them like thunder. Heracles' heart pounded. To bear the sky, even for a moment, was to risk eternity. No mortal had ever endured such a burden and lived. But to refuse would be to fail. He bowed his head. If that is the price, then I accept it. Atlas regarded him with a quiet nod. Then remember this, son of Zeus, do not fight the weight. Surrender to it. Let it become you, or it will destroy you. As the Titan began to move, the world itself seemed to groan. Mountains shuddered. Clouds broke. The stars flickered wildly. Slowly, carefully, Atlas knelt, a movement so vast that even the sky bent to follow. When his hands met the earth, Heracles stepped forward. The heavens shifted, descending like a living tide. The moment the weight touched his shoulders, the demigod gasped. It was not pressure, it was existence itself pressing down upon him. Every heartbeat of the world, every whisper of time, every star and storm, every sorrow of creation, all rested on his back. Atlas straightened, stretching his arms for the first time in ages. The world exhaled. The Titan looked at the mortal now kneeling beneath the heavens, trembling, yet unbroken. You endure, Atlas said softly. Perhaps we are not so different, you and I. And with that, he turned toward the horizon, where the golden glow of the Hesperides garden shimmered like a dream. The sky, for the first time since the dawn of time, was no longer his to bear. And the world held its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Can even a hero lift the burden meant for eternity, and what might he discover beneath its weight? For the first time since the age of rebellion, the heavens rested on mortal shoulders. The weight did not crush Heracles outright, it settled like a living mountain, testing him, measuring him, deciding whether this brief experiment in courage would end as legend or warning. Every star seemed to lean closer. Every gust of wind tugged at the fabric of the sky. His knees trembled. His breath shortened. The burden was unlike any he had ever touched, not mass, but meaning. He felt rivers turning in their beds, seasons uncoiling into harvest and sleep, the hush of unborn storms. 1,000 small futures pressed into his bones. Heracles remembered Atlas's counsel, do not fight the weight. Surrender to it. He let the sky sink through him, not against him, and something shifted, the force poured along his spine, through hips and heels, into the earth. The ground accepted what he could not hold alone. He became channel, not wall. The pain did not vanish, but it found its place. He spoke into the wind, not knowing if Atlas could hear, I endure. Far across the twilight, the Titan strode toward the garden of the Hesperides. Each step woke old echoes, bronze shield lullabies, apple bloom perfume, the laughter of daughters raised in the shelter of dusk. The gates parted at his shadow. The sisters paused in their dance. For a heartbeat, the garden remembered a quiet before punishment and a father before a pillar. Father, Egli whispered, her voice like honeyed light. Atlas's vast face softened. I am here, for a little while. Behind the golden trees, something stirred, coils upon coils of dusk-dark scales. The guardian serpent laden uncurled from the roots, eyes glowing like two small sunsets. It hissed, not in malice, but in duty. Its voice scraped the leaves. The apples cannot be taken. That is the law. Atlas knelt until the light of the fruit glazed his brow. Then let a lawkeeper touch them. He extended his hand, not to pluck but to steady his daughter's trembling fingers. A single bow, Egli. The Hesperides glanced from the tree to their father. They could not defy Hera's charge, yet how could they refuse the one whose breath was the reason the garden breathed at all? The paradox lay gentle and terrible between them. At last, Egli nodded. One bow. For mercy. Atlas turned to Ladon. Watch me, he said simply. If I take more than I should, strike. The serpent's stare narrowed. I will. Atlas rose and moved with reverence. He did not tear the branch, he eased it free with a gardener's care, as if pruning the dusk itself. 3 apples, heavy as stars, settled into his palm. Their light chimed softly, not the cold light of Olympus, but the warm glow of vows kept too long. In that glow, the Titan saw himself reflected, not the rebel or the prisoner, but the bridge. Between heaven and earth. Between law and loophole. Between what must never be taken and what, in a single rare moment, may be given. He wrapped the fruit in a fold of his mantle and turned to go. The Hesperides stepped closer, the youngest, Hesperia, touching his wrist like a child afraid the tides might pull her father away. "Will you return?" Atlas looked toward the horizon, where a mortal knelt beneath a sky. "I must," he said. "There is a bargain in the world now. The sky remembers bargains." Back where the earth lifts into evening, Heracles counted his heartbeats by the pull of constellations. He discovered new pains, not the kind that roar, but the kind that whisper until a man weeps. He discovered new strengths, too, not violence, not speed, but something like trust, the trust that the earth would meet his weight, the trust that a promise made by a Titan would be kept. He began to sense a quiet conversation in the pressure, as if the sky and the ground spoke through his bones, asking whether he could be their hinge a little longer. He answered with breath, "Yes. Yes. Yes." The gods watched, some curious, some amused. Hermes hovered nearby, invisible to the demigod, timing the experiment with a gambler's grin. Hera studied the horizon from Olympus's marbled edge, her lips a hard line, her eyes impossible to read. Zeus said nothing, whether in pride or worry, no one knew. Time stretched like molten bronze. Shadows lengthened. When at last the sea brightened with a band of hammered gold, Atlas reappeared, stride even, expression unreadable, a mantle folded over one arm. "Heracles," he called, voice rolling across the plain. "You have done what no mortal has done." The demigod did not lift his head. "Have you the apples?" Atlas drew near, the twilight shaking from his shoulders. He set the mantle upon a slab of rock and opened it. 3 suns rolled into the dusk, the apples sang a soft, impossible chord. For a heartbeat, Heracles nearly forgot the weight. "They are yours," Atlas said. "Your penance moves forward." He paused, then added in a voice almost gentle, "I had forgotten what walking felt like. The sky, it is louder than you think. It sings a strange, old song." Heracles felt his resolve slip sideways toward envy. What would it be to stand, to walk, to inhale without stars in the lungs? He closed his eyes, tasted the thought, and let it go. "Then take your place again," he said. "And I will take mine." Atlas looked past him to the horizon, not at the apples, not at the hero, but at freedom lying like a thin blue line where sea kissed sky. The line trembled. A longing old as rebellion rose in him. He could cross a river. Climb a ridge. Visit a daughter's garden not as a ghost but as a father. The desire did not roar. It breathed. He tore his gaze away. "You are brave, son of Zeus." "And you are just," Heracles answered, meaning it. Silence gathered, a silence with teeth. It seemed to wait for a choice. Atlas approached, hands lifted to receive his ancient charge. The heavens leaned, ready to fall into their old cradle. But a shadow crossed the Titan's face, slight as a cloud. "Heracles," he said softly, "I have carried this longer than the moon remembers. Let me deliver these apples myself to your king. Let me taste a little road. An hour, a day." The sky hummed warning through the demigod's bones. Bargains grow teeth when they overstay. Yet the request was not cruel, it was human, which made it dangerous. "If I release you," Heracles said carefully, "who holds the world?" Atlas's eyes glinted with sorrow and calculation. "You," he said. "You have learned to breathe under heaven. You could hold it, a little longer." A gull wheeled and cried above them, the only witness to the tremor in fate. Heracles felt the weight's cunning, endurance breeds confidence, and confidence tempts eternity. Another hour might become a day, an age. How many heroes had been trapped not by chains, but by almost? He steadied his breath. Compassion could not be naive. I will not forfeit my task, he said. Nor the balance. Atlas's jaw tightened, not anger, but the ache of a door closing. Then let us finish the bargain, he said, and sank to one knee. The sky tilted, searching for its old shoulders. Quickly. Shift the dome back to me. Place a cushion, your lion's pelt, so the heavens do not bite while I settle. Heracles blinked sweat from his lashes. The request was reasonable. He needed the pelt for the road, but a moment of padding would spare the Titan pain. Still, the sky murmured its warning, wars are won and lost on the thickness of a single fold. He nodded. A breath. No more. Heracles inched the lion's skin between his neck and the firmament, keeping both hands braced. Ready? Atlas leaned forward, arms rising to accept destiny once more. The heavens rolled like a living sea. For a heartbeat, they floated between bearers, the world sustained by a truth shared, not a body alone. Now, Atlas whispered. Now. Heracles shifted with the grace of a wrestler. Atlas slid beneath and caught the dome. The sky sighed into its ancient harbor. The earth's tremor eased. Stars found their courses again. For a long moment they breathed, Titan and mortal, two silhouettes under a music only they could hear. Atlas closed his eyes. Thank you, he said, and meant it. Heracles gathered the mantle and the fruit, tying them close. He felt strangely lighter, though his shoulders still ached with the memory of worlds. He bowed. I will remember your lesson. Atlas opened his eyes, the horizon's old fire steady there. And I yours. The breeze lifted, the apples chimed, the pelt's edge fluttered at the Titan's neck. Somewhere, the Hesperides resumed their song. But beneath the calm, a fresh current moved. Desire is not done with bargains. And a Titan's heart, even a just one, can be swayed by the faintest taste of road and wind. What does freedom mean to one who has never known it, and what price will he ask when desire returns? The air at the edge of the world shimmered with new tension. The stars had steadied, the heavens had found their balance once more, yet the silence between Atlas and Heracles was heavy with something unspoken. The bargain was done. The golden apples gleamed in the hero's hands, each one radiant with divine light. Atlas stood again beneath the sky, his form vast, steady, and solemn. But something inside him had changed, not in body, but in spirit. For the first time in ages, he had tasted freedom. He had walked beneath his own sky, unbound, unburdened. And now that taste would not leave him. At first, he said nothing. The wind moved gently across the plains, carrying the scent of salt and dusk. Heracles stood watching him, the mantle of apples slung across his shoulder, waiting for the Titan's final blessing, some word of farewell before he began the long journey home. But Atlas did not speak. He stared instead toward the west, where the sea swallowed the horizon. His expression was distant, almost tender. Then, without turning, he said, "You have done well, son of Zeus. The heavens did not crush you. Few could have endured even a moment beneath their weight." Heracles bowed slightly. "Your burden is greater than any I have known. I honor it." A low sound escaped Atlas's chest, half chuckle, half sigh. "It is not my burden alone," he murmured. "It is the world's. Yet for a moment, I was free of it. I had forgotten how light air feels when it belongs to you." He paused, his gaze still fixed on the horizon. "Do you know what it means to feel the wind without responsibility, Heracles? To breathe without the sky expecting something in return?" The demigod shook his head. "I know only that freedom is earned by endurance." Atlas turned now, his eyes narrowing. There was no malice there, only an ancient longing that even eternity could not erase. You speak like a god, he said. But you are still mortal enough to be forgiven for your ignorance. Heracles frowned, unsure where the words were leading. Why do you speak so? The Titan's voice lowered, calm and deliberate. Because I have decided something. You are strong, stronger than any man, perhaps stronger than many gods. The world could rest safely on your shoulders. And I have carried it long enough. The word struck like lightning through the still air. Heracles tensed, his grip on the mantle tightening. You would abandon your post? Atlas tilted his head. Abandon? No. Entrust. The heavens have learned your strength. They did not break you. Why should I return to chains when a new bearer has already proven himself worthy? For a moment, Heracles said nothing. The notion was absurd, yet the sincerity in the Titan's tone gave it weight. I agreed to bear the sky only until your return, Heracles replied. A bargain made is a bargain kept. Atlas's gaze softened. Ah, but bargains evolve, don't they? You have done your task, fetched your apples, pleased your king. What harm if the heavens find new shoulders for a time? He stepped forward, slow and towering, each movement causing the air to thrum like a drumbeat. Think of it, Heracles. You would become legend beyond all legends. Not merely a hero, but the new pillar of the world. No more labor, no more command, no more servitude to the whims of Zeus. Just purpose. Pure, eternal purpose. The demigod's heart pounded. His mind filled with images, of rest from the endless trials, of peace earned through endurance, of becoming something more than mortal. Yet beneath that temptation stirred another voice, quieter, sharper, the echo of the sky itself whispering through his blood, beware gifts wrapped in destiny. Heracles breathed deeply. You would leave the world to me. And what of your daughters, your duty, your vow? Atlas smiled faintly. The world will not fall, not if you hold it. My daughters will still see the stars, and my vow, he gestured toward the heavens, has already been fulfilled 1,000 times over. Why should a vow never end? The hero's eyes narrowed. Because ending it unravels the meaning of all endurance. Atlas's expression flickered, the first sign of frustration cracking through his calm. You speak like Zeus, he said, voice colder now. Always judging, never understanding. You call it endurance, I call it imprisonment. The sky rumbled faintly, as though disapproving of his words. Atlas looked up, and for a brief, terrible instant, Heracles saw something in his eyes, not rebellion, but resentment. A spark older than the gods, the memory of his father's war, the ghost of chains still clinging to his soul. He stepped closer, looming over the hero. You are strong enough, Heracles. Let it be your turn. Take the weight, not as burden, but as crown. Heracles met his gaze, calm but unyielding. You wish to be free, Titan. I understand. But if I remain, who will deliver the apples to King Eurystheus? The gods themselves decreed my task must be complete. Atlas paused. The logic was sound, yet he was too close to freedom to surrender so easily. Then, a thought, cunning, bold, and desperate, slid into his mind. He nodded slowly. You are right. The task must be finished. He looked toward the east, where the light of Olympus glowed faintly across the world. I will carry them for you. I will deliver the apples to your king myself, speak your name, and return with your freedom secure. All the gods will bear witness to your victory. Heracles studied him, suspicion threading through his chest like smoke. The offer was perfect, too perfect. And while you walk the earth, who holds the heavens? Atlas smiled, a wide, serene, practiced smile. You, for just a while longer. Only until I return. The silence between them deepened. Even the wind seemed to hesitate. Then Heracles spoke, his tone even, his words deliberate. Very well, Atlas. I will bear it a little longer, but first, one small favor. The Titan's brow furrowed. Favor? Heracles nodded, shifting his weight beneath the sky. You have carried this for ages. I am new to the task. Would you take it back for just a moment, only long enough for me to place the lion's pelt across my shoulders again? The heavens bite at the neck, and I would rather not offend them with discomfort. Atlas hesitated. It was a reasonable request, the same trick he had used before when regaining the sky. He saw no harm in it. With a weary exhale, he knelt, stretching his arms wide once more. Quickly, then. Heracles braced himself. As the Titan lifted the burden from his back, the world seemed to tilt. The sky rolled like thunder, slipping into its rightful place upon Atlas's shoulders once again. The moment it settled, Heracles straightened, fast as lightning, the apples clutched under his arm. Atlas blinked. Well. The pelt. But the hero was already stepping away. Keep it, Titan, he said. You wear it better. For the first time in centuries, Atlas laughed, a sound like stone cracking under sunlight. There was no anger in it, only recognition. You are clever, son of Zeus, he said, his deep voice echoing across the plains. Clever, and merciless. Heracles turned, the golden light of the apples flickering across his bronze skin. No, he said. Only wise enough to know the weight that is not mine to bear. Then he walked away, each step echoing with the thunder of destiny fulfilled. Atlas watched him go until the hero vanished beyond the horizon. Then he looked up once more at the endless sky, sighed, and whispered, half to himself, half to eternity. Perhaps I needed to be deceived, to remember what I am. And the stars above him shone brighter, as if approving. Is cunning stronger than endurance, or are they mirrors of the same survival? When Heracles vanished beyond the horizon, the world grew still again. The ripples of his departure faded, and once more, the only sound was the breath of the wind and the slow, patient hum of eternity. Atlas stood beneath the sky he had momentarily surrendered, its weight familiar now, almost intimate. Yet something within him had changed. He had tasted freedom, even if for only an hour. He had felt air on his skin that was not compressed by heaven's edge. That memory, faint but sharp, would linger forever like a scar across his spirit. For a time, he said nothing. He simply listened. The heavens above him sang their endless music, faint, eternal, ancient. The stars whispered secrets that only he could hear. He had thought himself beyond wonder, but even now, the cosmos still surprised him. Each sound, each flicker of starlight, felt heavier and holier now that he had briefly known their absence. But soon, the ache returned. Freedom's echo became pain again. The muscles of his shoulders, vast as mountains themselves, groaned beneath the familiar burden. The weight was not new, but the memory of its absence made it unbearable. For the first time in millennia, Atlas roared. The sound tore through the air, shaking the clouds, splitting the sea, cracking the crust of the earth itself. Across the horizon, continents trembled. Valleys deepened. Mountains buckled upward as though answering his fury. And thus, from the Titan's anguish, the earth remade itself. Ridges rose from the western lands, first as ripples, then as walls, then as titanic spines that stretched toward the heavens. The ground heaved like a living beast, stone piling upon stone, until the sky itself seemed to rest upon their peaks. When the shaking ceased, a vast range stood where the horizon had once been flat, a monument of stone and sorrow that touched the clouds. The mortals who would one day walk the earth would call them the Atlas Mountains, believing they held up the heavens. And in truth, they did, for each peak was born from the tremor of the Titan's grief. Atlas looked down at them, the jagged lines, the scarred summits, and whispered, "So even my pain becomes landscape." From Olympus, the gods watched in uneasy awe. Poseidon felt the tremor in his seas, Apollo's lyre went silent, even Zeus paused in his throne room, his eyes narrowing at the western sky. He knew what it meant, not rebellion, but remembrance. The world had absorbed the Titan's agony and turned it into permanence. Zeus sighed, neither pleased nor angry. So he builds the world again, even in despair. And Hera, standing beside him, said softly, endurance leaves its mark. On earth, the newly born mountains gleamed in the fading light. Snow crowned their summits, rivers carved through their feet, and forests gathered at their knees. They became the boundary between heaven and earth, a visible echo of the unseen burden Atlas bore. Mortals who ventured near them could feel it, the air thicker, the gravity gentler, the silence profound. Shepherds claimed they heard low rumbles beneath the soil, as if a giant sighed within. Travelers swore that sometimes, in the dusk, a shadow vast and still could be seen among the peaks, his arms stretched upward, holding the sky. They built shrines in his honor, not temples of worship, but altars of respect. Small fires burned in clay bowls. Offerings of bread and olive oil were left beside mountain springs. The people did not pray to him for favor, they thanked him for stability. They called him the Still One, the guardian of the horizon, the unmoving Father. And in a strange, quiet way, their reverence comforted him. Though Atlas could not see them directly, he felt their gratitude ripple through the ground, tiny pulses of warmth that reached his buried feet. They reminded him that even in endless punishment, there was purpose. His suffering had shaped the very world these mortals lived upon. His burden was their foundation. Still, at night, when the stars turned overhead and the air cooled, he would remember Heracles, that fleeting reflection of courage, that echo of his own younger will. Clever mortal, he murmured once, his voice like distant thunder. You carry your weight differently, but you carry it all the same. The wind seemed to answer, whispering across the peaks, as if agreeing. And so, time moved again, centuries rolling into millennia. Civilizations rose and fell at the base of his mountains. Pharaohs built temples that pointed toward his form. Poets wrote of a Titan who turned despair into geography. Artists painted him in silhouette, a giant holding not just the heavens, but hope itself. Through it all, Atlas never moved. His stance became the measure of eternity, the unchanging axis around which the world turned. Yet deep within him, memory still glowed, faint as embers beneath stone. He remembered the scent of the Hesperides garden, the laughter of his daughters, the brief release of weight when Heracles took the sky. Those memories hurt more than any punishment Zeus could have devised. But they were also what kept him sane. One night, as the constellations shifted above, Atlas noticed something new. The 7 stars of the Pleiades shone brighter than before, his daughters, now fully immortalized in the sky. Their light flickered directly above his head, as if watching over him. He smiled, a rare, weary smile that only the stars could see. You keep vigil, he said softly. Then I am not alone. The stars seemed to shimmer in answer, their light trembling like laughter. And though his arms still ached, though the weight of heaven never lifted, Atlas felt something he had not felt since the dawn of creation, peace. The mountains beneath him settled. The wind softened. The earth, at last, stopped trembling. He looked upon the world and understood, even the heaviest burden can create beauty, if one endures it long enough. And so the Titan stood, no longer cursing his fate, no longer yearning for freedom. His pain had become the planet's form, his stillness had become its stability. He was not merely holding the sky anymore, he was holding meaning. In the heart of the world's western edge, a shadow forever stands beneath the stars, his voice now the wind, his tears now the rivers. The mortals who hear him do not fear him. They only whisper, as they pass beneath his mountains. He never fell. When myths shape mountains, do they truly die, or do they become the world they once held together? Ages passed like waves breaking upon the shore of eternity. Empires rose and crumbled into dust, gods faded into stories, and mortals forgot the sound of divine voices. But one truth endured, the sight of a vast figure holding the heavens, unseen, yet deeply felt. Atlas remained. He did not move, yet the world moved because of him. He did not speak, yet the air itself carried his unspoken wisdom. The earth's rhythm was his heartbeat, the sky's arc his breath. And as mortals evolved, as their temples turned to ruins and their scrolls to sand, they began to search for meaning in what he represented. It was no longer his strength that awed them. It was his stillness. Philosophers from forgotten cities journeyed west, drawn by something beyond curiosity. They would sit at the feet of his mountains, gazing toward the horizon, and meditate upon the question that his existence posed: what is the purpose of endurance? The first of them, a traveler named Thales of Libya, wrote upon stone. He who carries the sky does not resist it. He becomes it. He had seen the great western peaks shimmering beneath twilight, their snowcaps burning gold, and he felt the truth echo through him: that burden, accepted fully, transforms into balance. Others followed. They brought scrolls, symbols, and prayers. They called Atlas the silent philosopher, the first Stoic, the keeper of equilibrium. To them, he was not a figure of punishment, but of transcendence, a god who had turned suffering into structure. And so, a new theology was born, one that did not worship lightning or conquest, but endurance. In their writings, the scholars spoke of the weight, a sacred metaphor for the invisible load every soul must bear. They said that to live is to lift, to carry the unseen sky of one's duty, grief, and truth. The wise do not seek to set it down. They learn to breathe beneath it. Even the gods took notice. From Olympus, Athena, goddess of wisdom, looked west and said to her father, "He has done what we have not. He has turned fate into philosophy." Zeus answered with a faint smile. "Perhaps wisdom is born only when power grows quiet." Meanwhile, far below, among mortals, temples rose not to the conquerors, but to the bearer. Shrines of stone and silence appeared at mountain passes. Pilgrims walked barefoot to them, not to pray for release, but to give thanks for resilience. They brought offerings of clay weights, each inscribed with their burdens, loss, regret, love, hope, and laid them upon the ground before an altar shaped like shoulders. They called it the offering of the sky. One night, a philosopher named Menander of Rhodes spent 7 days at the base of the Atlas Mountains in meditation. On the final night, he dreamed. In his dream, a shadow vast as the world spoke to him. Its voice was calm, deep, and infinite. "Why do you seek meaning in weight?" the voice asked. "Because it is constant," Menander replied. "Because when joy fades and fear passes, only burden remains. It is the one thing that does not abandon us." The shadow was silent for a long time. Then it said, "Then you have already found peace." When Menander awoke, he wept, not from sorrow, but from understanding. He returned to his city and wrote, "The gods who feast will be forgotten, but the one who holds will be remembered forever." And so it was. Through centuries of storms and silence, Atlas became not just a figure, but an idea. His myth traveled across cultures, changing names but not meaning. In the East, they called him the bearer of heaven. In the North, the steadfast one. In the South, the root beneath the sky. Wherever men spoke of duty, they spoke of him. Artists carved his likeness into marble, a giant bent but not broken, knees locked, muscles straining, eyes steady. They placed him at the entrances of temples and libraries, as if to remind all who entered that knowledge, too, must be carried. Poets sang of him in the quiet hours of night. He does not fight the world, nor beg the stars to ease. He holds. And in his holding, all things breathe. But even as the world turned him into symbol, the real Atlas still stood, listening, feeling, understanding. The prayers of mortals reached him not as words, but as vibrations through the earth. He could tell which heart spoke truth and which merely sought comfort. One day, a young woman climbed the mountain's lower slopes, driven by grief. Her child had died, and she had come to curse the gods for their silence. At the summit, exhausted and trembling, she looked to the sky and cried out, "If you truly hold this world, then why do you let it hurt?" The wind shifted, carrying her voice upward. And though the Titan could not answer in words, a single stone broke loose from above, tumbling down to rest beside her. When she touched it, it was warm, faintly pulsing, like a heartbeat. She understood. The world does not hurt because it is cruel. It hurts because it is held. From that day on, she built a small shrine where the stone had fallen. Others followed. They left offerings not to beg for mercy, but to promise endurance. And so, the legend of Atlas deepened, from punishment to philosophy, from myth to mirror. Even the stars began to change. The constellations above his head slowly arranged themselves into a pattern unseen before, a faint outline of two hands, palms upward, as though the heavens themselves acknowledged the one who bore them. When the philosophers of the New Age gazed upon that constellation, they called it Manus Caeli, the hands of heaven. They said, the sky rests not upon arrogance, nor upon vengeance, but upon patience. Atlas himself never heard the words. But if he had, he would have smiled. Because in the endless stillness, he had already learned the final truth: burden, when embraced, becomes balance. And from that balance flows all life, all movement, all meaning. He was no longer a symbol of defeat, nor even of defiance. He had become the philosophy of endurance itself, the truth that everything worth preserving must first be carried. The mountains were his muscles. The stars were his breath. The earth was his soul. And the world, fragile, beautiful, fleeting, was his reason. What if the heaviest burdens are the ones that sustain us, and the quietest strength is the kind that never sets the sky down? The world does not end in silence. It turns. It changes. And even the heavens, once thought eternal, are not immune to motion. Ages slipped by like sand through divine fingers. Empires rose and crumbled into dust, oceans changed their borders, and men charted the heavens their ancestors once feared to name. Yet one truth persisted: the stars still spun around the same unmoving axis, around the quiet endurance of Atlas. But one night, the heavens trembled. It began softly, a subtle shimmer in the deep black, the kind that only the oldest stars notice. Constellations wavered. Their ancient geometry shifted by the smallest fraction. Mortals, gazing upward, saw nothing unusual. But Atlas felt it instantly. A vibration. A change in balance. The sky he had held for countless eons was moving. At first, he thought it was imagination, a trick of fatigue, some illusion conjured by the weariness of millennia. But then it came again, a faint drift, like a sigh across the cosmos. The heavens themselves were no longer fixed. He braced his legs, pressing deeper into the earth. The mountains below him trembled but did not break. The stars swirled ever so slightly above, as though being gently rearranged by unseen hands. Then he understood. This was not destruction. It was evolution. The universe, the very sky he bore, was alive, expanding, breathing, creating new constellations even as old ones faded. The stars he had once memorized by name were no longer where they used to be. The familiar map of light had become a flowing river. Atlas whispered to himself, his voice blending with the sound of the wind. Even the heavens grow. Even eternity changes its shape. He did not resist. He could not. Instead, he adjusted, his arms shifting slightly, his shoulders rolling in a motion that would take centuries to complete. The sky balanced again, finding new harmony in his endurance. But with that motion came something unexpected, a pulse of awareness. For the first time since his punishment, Atlas felt the universe speaking back. It was not a voice, but a resonance, a hum deep within the bones of creation. Every star, every orbit, every shimmer of light was a note in a cosmic symphony, and he was the instrument that carried its tune. He could feel the path of comets slicing across infinity, the distant birth of galaxies blooming in silence, the death of old suns scattering dust that would one day become new worlds. The universe was not weight, it was song. And he, its eternal bearer, was not cursed. He was chosen. In that realization, something within him softened. The bitterness that had once filled his heart, the ache of rebellion, the memory of betrayal, the longing for release, began to dissolve. He was no longer a prisoner beneath the sky, he was a partner to it. From Olympus, the gods noticed the shift. Zeus stood at the edge of his throne room, gazing toward the west where the stars seemed to dance differently. Hera joined him, her eyes sharp. "He moves," she said softly. "After all these ages, he moves." Zeus nodded. "Not against us. With the heavens." Hera frowned. "Can even endurance evolve?" Zeus answered, "Endurance is evolution, the slowest kind, the truest kind." And so, for the first time since the Titanomachy, the king of the gods bowed his head, not in pity, not in sorrow, but in respect. Below, on earth, the changes in the heavens began to stir mortal minds. Navigators noticed the stars drifting ever so slightly from their ancient paths. Priests of forgotten temples redrew their celestial maps. Poets wrote of the sky that breathes, unaware that what they described was the heartbeat of a titan. In time, even philosophers adapted their teachings. The old idea of a static universe gave way to something more profound, that movement, not stillness, was the true face of eternity. Atlas's myth evolved once more. He was no longer merely the bearer of the sky, but the keeper of motion, the silent force that allowed the cosmos to change without collapsing. Among the Pleiades, his daughters saw it too. From their constellation high above, they glowed brighter, their orbits shifting slightly closer together as though reaching toward their father. Mortals who studied the stars noticed the difference and named it precession, but to the old gods, it was simply affection, the daughters adjusting their path to stay nearer to the one who held them. On a quiet night, when the air was clear and the world below slept, Atlas lifted his head and gazed upward. For the first time in forever, he smiled. "You move with me," he said softly. "Then I am not alone." And the stars, in their slow, patient revolutions, seemed to smile back. The world below changed again. The ancient shrines crumbled. New cities rose. Scholars began to write not of gods, but of gravity, that unseen law which held the cosmos in place. They gave it names, equations, and theories, never realizing that what they described was the shadow of Atlas's labor, the echo of his endurance. Even as belief faded, his presence remained. Because myths do not vanish when forgotten. They transform, reshaping themselves into the truths that science rediscovers centuries later. And so, as the stars continued their dance, Atlas became both memory and mechanism, myth and physics, faith and force. He was the bridge between the ancient and the eternal, the story that refused to die because it had never truly been a story at all. He whispered again, voice deep as the ocean floor. Perhaps this was always the purpose, not to hold the heavens still, but to let them move safely. The constellations answered him with light. The Milky Way rippled like silk. Shooting stars streaked across the horizon in acknowledgement, each one a fleeting spark of gratitude. In that moment, the Titan's heart, vast and timeless, beat in rhythm with the universe. He felt no pain now, no resistance. The burden was not a burden. It was balance. From the east to the west, mortals looked up at the shimmering night and felt a strange, unspoken peace, as though the world itself had exhaled. They did not know why. But they sensed it, something immense, ancient, and kind had moved in the darkness, and the stars had followed. And as they whispered their wishes into the sky, somewhere in the unseen corners of eternity, Atlas's voice drifted like wind across stone. "Carry well what you are given, and you, too, will keep the heavens in motion." The stars blinked once more, realigning into new harmony, the old order reborn through movement. The sky had shifted. The stars had moved. And with them, the meaning of endurance had changed forever. Can suffering become structure, and can the one who bears eternity teach it how to move? The gods began to fade. Not in power, but in presence. Their temples, once carved in gold and song, began to crumble beneath creeping ivy. Their names became echoes on the tongues of poets rather than prayers on the lips of believers. Humanity, restless and curious, stepped from the shadow of Olympus and began to claim the world as its own. And through it all, Atlas stood, unmoved, unseen, but ever watchful. He had witnessed the birth of gods, the wars of titans, the rise and ruin of empires. Yet nothing stirred him more deeply than this quiet transformation, the moment when mortals ceased to fear the heavens and began to study them. Fire no longer danced in altars to the divine, it flickered now in glass lamps held by thinkers who charted the stars. They measured, mapped, and named the constellations that once were prayers: Orion, Cassiopeia, the Pleiades. The sky became a library. And though they no longer whispered his name, Atlas smiled, for he could feel that their curiosity carried the same reverence as worship. Men built towers of stone, then metal, then light. They invented lenses that pierced the darkness, eyes that reached farther than imagination. What once was myth became mathematics. What once was magic became motion. Yet beneath every discovery, beneath every calculation of the cosmos, the same question pulsed: who holds all this together? They called it gravity, an invisible force that binds stars, planets, and men to the world. They gave it form through numbers, laws, and elegant diagrams. But in that invisible force, Atlas still existed, not as flesh or god, but as idea. The old Titan had become truth itself. From his throne of silence at the world's edge, he could feel humanity's awakening. Their dreams pulsed through the ground like currents of energy. They were learning to bear the sky in their own way, not upon their shoulders, but within their minds. Atlas watched as mortals built observatories upon his mountains, glass domes gleaming beneath his shadow, their telescopes turning skyward. He felt each tremor of wonder that ran through them when they discovered a new star, a new law, a new name for something eternal. And for the first time in eons, he laughed, not in bitterness, but in pride. "They carry it now," he murmured to the wind. "The weight is shared." It was true. Humanity had begun to bear the burden once his alone, the desire to understand, to endure, to uphold. But where there is discovery, there is also danger. For knowledge, like divine power, tempts as easily as it enlightens. As the centuries rolled forward, mankind grew bold. They pierced the sky not with prayer, but with fire. Great machines roared upward, leaving trails of smoke that sliced through the firmament. Atlas watched as their rockets climbed, carrying mortals beyond the clouds, into the realm once ruled by gods. He should have felt threatened, perhaps even insulted. But he did not. Instead, he felt something unexpected: relief. "You ascend because you must," he whispered. "Perhaps that is what it means to hold the sky, not with arms, but with ambition." Yet for all their triumphs, mankind still bore unseen burdens. They carried wars, greed, sorrow, and longing, invisible skies pressing down upon their spirits. And in those moments, when they looked up at the stars to seek peace or forgiveness, Atlas was still there. Not as a figure of stone or myth, but as the feeling of quiet strength beneath despair, the whisper that says, "Hold on." At the edges of his mountains, people continued to climb. Some came for beauty, some for answers, some simply to feel small beneath something vast. On clear nights, they would reach the summit and see the same sky that Atlas held, galaxies wheeling in slow, endless dance. And in that sight, even the most disbelieving heart would soften. They might not know his name anymore, but they felt him. They always did. For in every soul that endures hardship, in every parent that bears love through loss, in every dreamer that stands unbroken beneath an indifferent world, there, the spirit of Atlas lives. He is not gone. He is simply multiplied. The old myths call this the age of mortals, but perhaps it is better understood as the age of inheritance. The divine burdens once carried by gods have passed to humankind. They are the new torchbearers, the new skyholders, fragile, fallible, and yet, somehow, strong enough. Atlas could feel the shift, the weight of heaven growing lighter in his grasp, as if humanity's collective strength had taken some of it from him. Not through rebellion, but through empathy. They have learned my lesson, he said softly. They no longer need to see me to know me. And though his stance did not change, though the stars still rested upon his shoulders, something within him lifted, an internal release that even Zeus himself could never have granted. He was no longer a punished titan chained to the will of gods. He was a witness to the rise of purpose. Below, the city sparkled like constellations inverted, mortal stars scattered across the dark earth. Atlas gazed upon them, marveling at how humans had mirrored the heavens he bore. They have built their own sky, he whispered. A reflection of mine. The world turned again, slowly, gracefully, and he turned with it. The boundary between myth and man blurred. Some still spoke his name in old stories, children's fables, bedtime tales. Others studied the laws of physics, never realizing they were naming his essence anew. In either form, he endured. For endurance, unlike gods or kingdoms, never dies, it only changes its shape. At the summit of the Atlas Mountains, a child once stood beside her father and asked, "Papa, who holds the sky up there?" The father smiled and answered, "The earth does, my dear. Gravity keeps it all together." But the little girl frowned, eyes fixed on the glowing horizon. "No," she whispered. "Someone's helping." And perhaps she was right. For that night, as the stars shimmered above her, a faint rumble passed through the stone, a heartbeat older than memory, steady as time. Atlas smiled. Somewhere, deep beneath her feet, he whispered to the child's innocent courage. "Yes. Someone's helping, and now, it's you." The age of mortals had begun, not the end of gods, but their quiet continuation through every heart that dares to hold the impossible. And so the Titan remained, unseen but ever present, watching the new bearers rise beneath the same eternal dome he once shouldered alone. What do humans carry when the gods fall silent, and is that silence not proof that we become the echo of their strength? Long before the maps of men, before compasses pointed north and ships carved their way across the unknown, there was an island so radiant that it seemed born from sunlight itself. It was said to have risen where the western sea met the horizon, a kingdom of peace, art, and reason. The poets called it Atlantis, the shining city. And its name came from Atlas. Though centuries had passed since the Titan last moved, his memory lingered in mortal minds. The stories told of him had crossed from myth into metaphor, and from metaphor into blueprint. Atlantis, they said, was built in his image, strong, balanced, enduring. Its kings were said to be his descendants, the sons of Atlas who ruled not through war, but through harmony. The first king, Atlas the Younger, raised his palace upon the highest hill of the island. Its domes were made of orichalcum, a metal said to gleam like captured sunset. Pillars of marble lined the courtyards, and fountains of fresh water sprang from the earth, each one carved with symbols of the heavens. The people believed that, through such perfection, they honored the one who held the sky. But perfection has a weight of its own. At first, Atlantis flourished. Its people studied the stars, mastered the seas, and built temples not to beg favors of the gods, but to celebrate understanding. They lived as if the world's balance truly rested in their hands. And perhaps, for a time, it did. Yet pride is the shadow of achievement. In their quest to mirror divine order, the Atlanteans forgot humility. They began to see their knowledge as proof that they were above the laws of gods and nature alike. "We are the new pillars," their philosophers said. "We hold the world upright, not through strength, but through reason." Far across the sky, Atlas felt a tremor. It was not physical, no quake of earth or sky. It was the tremor of hubris, that subtle imbalance that precedes collapse. He had felt it before, in the voice of his brother Cronus, in the eyes of Zeus before the war, in the heartbeat of every being that thought itself beyond consequence. He whispered to the stars, "They bear my name, but not my lesson." Below, Atlantis glimmered brighter. Towers rose higher, ships sailed farther, and the island's beauty became blinding. Its kings, proud and wise, gathered in marble halls to discuss eternity as if they owned it. Among them was a prince, Evener, descendant of Atlas's line, a man who loved philosophy more than power. He was troubled by the growing arrogance of his kin. One night, he stood on the balcony of his palace, watching the sea shimmer under the stars, and prayed to the Titan whose name he bore. "If we are truly your children," he whispered, "show us how to carry what we've built, before it crushes us." The wind answered faintly, carrying a single word that only he could hear. "Endure." But the others would not listen. They built higher. They dug deeper. They drew energy from the earth itself, fire and crystal harnessed in ways even the gods had never attempted. Their mastery became obsession. Their civilization glittered like gold, but beneath the surface, cracks began to spread, unseen, unstoppable. Atlas watched from his eternal post, helpless to intervene. He could only feel the imbalance deepen, the rhythm of the world shifting toward chaos. And then, one night, the sea turned black. It began with a sound, a deep, mournful rumble that echoed from beneath the ocean floor. The stars above flickered, and even the heavens seemed to strain against his hands. Atlas looked down and saw the waters boiling, the horizon glowing red. Atlantis was sinking. The earth groaned, the mountains split, and the ocean surged like a living god unleashed. The people fled to their temples, praying not to be saved, but to be remembered. Evener, the prince, stood on the palace steps as the city cracked beneath him. "Father of endurance," he cried to the sky, "forgive us. We built too high. We forgot to bear what we created." The answer came not as voice, but as feeling, a deep, sorrowful acceptance that filled the air. The wind howled like grief, and the waves swallowed the island whole. When dawn broke, the sea was calm again. The sun rose as if nothing had happened. But where Atlantis once stood, there was only silence, a vast expanse of shimmering blue. Atlas bowed his head. "Another weight returns to me," he murmured. "Even dreams must rest upon something." For a long time, he was still. The loss of the island was not just the end of a civilization, it was the end of an idea, the belief that perfection could exist without balance. Yet even in destruction, Atlantis endured. The sea carried fragments of its memory, shards of marble, glimmers of orichalcum, songs whispered by the currents. Sailors who crossed the Western Ocean claimed to hear music beneath the waves, faint and sorrowful. Some said it was the echo of the Atlanteans calling to their father. Others said it was the heartbeat of the island itself. Atlas knew better. It was remembrance. He could feel their story pulsing through the water, through the stone, through the very stars above. The myth of Atlantis became part of his own, another burden, another lesson. As ages passed, poets began to write of the lost city, of its wisdom and its fall. Philosophers debated whether it had ever existed at all. But those who truly understood saw the deeper truth: Atlantis was not merely a place. It was a reflection of every civilization, of every soul that forgets the balance between creation and humility. And so, even as its ruins slept beneath the waves, Atlantis lived on, not in stone, but in warning. Atlas whispered. Even perfection must kneel before balance. Even light must remember shadow. In time, men would look to the sea and dream again of paradise lost, of a world that once touched the divine, only to drown in its own brilliance. They would search for the island, dig through history, argue over maps and myths. Yet the truth was never hidden. It stood in plain sight, carved across the horizon, the Atlas Mountains, still rising, still enduring. Atlantis had not vanished. It had only gone home, back into the hands of the one whose name it bore. The Titan raised his gaze toward the stars. "May they rest," he said softly. "They tried to hold the world, as I once did." And above him, the heavens shimmered, not in mourning, but in recognition. Do civilizations, like gods, collapse under their own weight, or do they sink only to teach the next world how to stand? Time passed, as it always does, not in silence, but in echoes. Atlantis was gone, yet its memory lingered like a heartbeat beneath the world. The ocean carried it in waves, the mountains in whispers, and humanity in stories. Each tale told of a civilization that reached for perfection and sank beneath its own weight, a mirror to every age that followed. Atlas felt those echoes through the earth, vibrating up through his feet into the vast muscles that bound him to eternity. They were not sounds but sensations, the pulse of human memory repeating the same ancient rhythm: creation, pride, fall, remembrance. He recognized it. It was the same pattern that had shaped the gods themselves. The Titan stood still, but his mind wandered, through centuries of myth, through languages that had never met, through hearts that never stopped carrying. Wherever life existed, he could feel his own lesson unfolding again and again. He felt it in the builder who raised cities from dust and crumbled beneath their cost. He felt it in the lover who carried another's sorrow until it became their own. He felt it in the poet who held the weight of words that would outlive them. Every act of endurance, every quiet defiance against despair, these were his reflections. And so, Atlas realized something profound: the burden had multiplied, but it had also lightened. No longer was he the sole bearer of the sky. The world itself had learned to share the weight. In every human who refused to break, he found a piece of himself, small but strong. They did not call it divine. They called it perseverance, duty, love. But the essence was the same. He whispered into the wind, "You carry me," without knowing it. And the wind, as if understanding, spread his voice across continents. It brushed over soldiers who stood through the final watch of night. It touched mothers who worked through exhaustion to keep their children warm. It swept through the libraries of scholars who read by candlelight, chasing truth through centuries of ink. Everywhere, Atlas's endurance lived on, not as myth, but as muscle within the spirit of humankind. Mortals, though fragile, had learned to bear their skies differently. Some carried the weight through faith, others through art, others still through silence. A sculptor, chiseling marble into form, would whisper to himself, "Patience." A sailor, lost at sea, would whisper the same. Both were prayers to the same God, though neither knew it. At times, the Titan wondered, did they still need him? He looked down at the world, a sphere alive with motion and light, buzzing with energy and will. Humanity had reached far beyond its beginnings. They had split atoms, tamed storms, mapped the stars. They had written stories that outlasted kings. And in doing so, they had become bearers of creation itself. They were, in their way, becoming divine. But divinity carries its own burden. Atlas sensed the same pattern stirring again, ambition swelling toward imbalance. Men sought to dominate nature rather than live within it. They dug into the earth's bones, pulled fire from its core, stretched wires across its skin. And though their progress glittered, beneath it hummed that familiar tremor of hubris. It was the same rhythm that had shaken Atlantis before it fell. The Titan sighed. They will learn again. But his voice carried no anger, no despair. Only patience. He had come to understand that the world's growth required its collapses, that every generation must bear the same lesson in new form. He no longer tried to stop the pattern. He simply bore it, as he bore the heavens. Each rise, each fall, was another note in the eternal song of endurance. From time to time, someone, a philosopher, a poet, a dreamer, would rediscover his name. They would carve statues of a man lifting the world upon his shoulders. The detail changed with every era. Sometimes Atlas was a god, sometimes a mortal, sometimes a metaphor for all who carried too much. In the Renaissance, they painted him with human sorrow, veins of light and fatigue woven into marble skin. In modern times, they cast him in iron and steel, the perfect symbol of strength without complaint. And in every version, he seemed to breathe, as if whispering through the centuries, "Hold fast." People passed him in museums and temples, pausing without knowing why. Something in his form, the strain, the grace, the quiet power, stirred recognition. It reminded them of themselves. Because, in truth, everyone carries a sky. For some, it is grief. For others, duty. For others still, the silent pressure of dreams deferred. But each burden, however invisible, connects them to him, to the first bearer, the eternal pillar. And when they finally collapse beneath the weight, when they think no one understands, the wind always finds them, whispering from some faraway horizon. You do not stand alone. In that whisper, the myth lives on. It travels through languages and lifetimes, taking new shapes but keeping the same soul. The myth of Atlas is not about punishment anymore. It is about inheritance, the gift of carrying and continuing. It is the echo in every burden. Even science, that language of logic, cannot escape the metaphor. Physicists name their greatest observatories atlases, their data maps atlas projects, instruments meant to hold knowledge vast as the sky. Engineers build machines of immense precision and strength, naming them after the Titan who endured. They do not pray to him, yet they honor him all the same. For every time humanity shoulders something immense, whether the weight of grief, discovery, or responsibility, the name of Atlas stirs again in the collective memory of the species. He has become not a god of the past, but a symbol of continuity. Somewhere, high above the world, he feels this and smiles. They are learning, he says. Not to drop the weight, but to share it. Below, storms roll across the oceans, mountains glow in dawn's first light, and the cities hum like constellations of their own. Atlas's reflection shines in skyscraper glass and marble ruins alike, unchanged in essence, ever reborn in form. He no longer waits for freedom. He no longer longs for release. For what greater release could there be than to see his endurance echoed in every soul that dares to keep going? The world moves, and so does he, through them. What if endurance itself is a kind of divinity, not the power to rule the world, but the strength to hold it together? There comes a time in every story, even the eternal ones, when memory begins to fade. Not because the story loses meaning, but because the world grows louder. As centuries bled into millennia, humanity's voice became the dominant sound beneath the heavens. Cities roared, engines sang, and lights replaced the stars. The night sky, once the canvas of gods, became pale beneath human fire. And somewhere beneath it all, Atlas still stood. He had not moved since the age when myths were new. The mountains around him had shifted, rivers carved new paths, and the constellations had drifted slowly from their ancient alignments. Yet the Titan remained unchanged, the one true constant in a world addicted to motion. But now, for the first time in eternity, he was being forgotten. Not by malice, but by noise. The mortals who once climbed his peaks to pray now climbed towers of glass for commerce. Those who once gazed upward in wonder now looked down, into screens, into streets, into reflections. They no longer saw the sky as something held, they saw it as something owned. And so, the story of Atlas began to fade. He felt it, not in his shoulders or arms, but in the fabric of his being. Where once belief had been a steady hum through the ground, now there was static. The vibrations of humanity's thoughts had grown chaotic, scattered. The pattern was breaking. He whispered to himself, they no longer remember the one who held their heavens. His voice went unheard. For a while, he wondered if this was what it meant to end, not to die, but to dissolve into irrelevance. The thought was strange to him. Titans did not fear death, they feared forgetting. And yet, even as that fear stirred, another truth whispered through the silence, endurance does not require recognition. He straightened slightly, feeling the heavens shift with him. Even if they forget, he murmured, I will still hold. But deep within the world, memory has a way of resisting extinction. In forgotten corners of the earth, in ruins swallowed by vines, in books gathering dust, in fragments of stories told by firelight, his name still lived. Not loud, but steady. A wandering poet in Morocco once wrote of the mountain that breathes beneath the stars. An old woman in Greece told her grandson that the wind sighing through the pines was a titan exhaling. A child in Peru, looking at the Milky Way, asked, "Who keeps it from falling?" And though none of them knew the full story, each kept a fragment alive, like sparks scattered across the dark. Those sparks began to hum again. Atlas felt them, faint but unmistakable, small points of warmth rising through the earth into his feet. He realized then that forgetting was not death. It was simply another kind of endurance, one in which the burden became invisible. His myth had entered its quiet phase, its echoing sleep. But even in sleep, endurance endures. As humanity raced forward, faster, louder, further, some among them began to feel a strange yearning. They built their cities higher, their machines stronger, but deep within, they sensed a missing balance. They could not name it, but they could feel it, a weight unaccounted for. And that was him. They began to rediscover him without knowing it. Philosophers wrote of the moral gravity that holds societies upright. Psychologists spoke of the invisible load that every soul carries. Even scientists, mapping the universe, spoke of dark matter, unseen, unfelt, but absolutely essential to keeping galaxies together. Each of these was a shadow of Atlas. His presence had moved beyond story into structure. He was no longer myth, he was principle. And perhaps that was what the gods had intended all along, for the myth to become reality so quietly that no one noticed. Still, sometimes, in the rare moments when the world grew quiet, Atlas would sense the faint brush of remembrance. A prayer whispered by accident. A poem read aloud beneath the stars. A sigh that carried his name without meaning to. Each time, he would smile. "They remember," he'd say softly. "Just enough." One night, the clouds parted, revealing the Pleiades, his daughters, glittering in the sky. Their light was faint, almost drowned by the glow of cities, but still visible to those who looked closely. Atlas raised his gaze, his voice a low rumble that shook the stars. "You shine still. That is enough." The stars twinkled in reply, 7 sparks against the endless dark. He closed his eyes and listened to the world below. Through the noise, he could still find moments of silence, rare, precious, human. Lovers watching sunsets. Travelers resting beneath open skies. Children lying in fields, asking questions too big for their age. In those moments, humanity brushed against him again, unknowingly. And he realized something beautiful: they did not need to remember his name to live his lesson. Because every act of patience, every choice to endure instead of surrender, every quiet strength that asks for no recognition, all of it was Atlas reborn. He was not forgotten. He had become universal. The forgotten Titan was now the pulse beneath existence, the invisible law that connects all things that refuse to fall. Even the gods, distant and diminished, felt it. From the heights of Olympus, Hera gazed into the mortal world and said to Zeus, "They no longer pray, but they live as we once hoped they would." And Zeus, after a long silence, replied, "Then Atlas has done what even I could not. He made eternity human." Below them, the Titan smiled. He no longer cared for temples or tributes, for myths or memories. His purpose had outgrown story. He did not need to be seen, because everything that endured was him. Every heartbeat that persisted after pain. Every mountain that held its ground through centuries of wind. Every promise kept, every light relit, every soul that chose to rise again, all of it was Atlas, still carrying the sky. The forgotten Titan was not gone. He was everywhere. And perhaps that is the greatest kind of immortality, not to be remembered, but to be lived. How does eternity remember those who never stopped enduring, or perhaps eternity itself endures because of them? The heavens were never meant to be still, only balanced. And after countless ages of struggle, silence, and transformation, that balance had finally begun to return. Atlas could feel it. The sky no longer pressed against him as punishment. Its weight had changed. It breathed with him now, like a living being resting in trust upon his shoulders. The stars pulsed in gentle rhythm, a vast cosmic heartbeat synchronized with his own. Each vibration, each ripple of celestial movement, was a whisper from the universe saying, "We are in harmony again." It had taken eons to reach this peace. Countless cycles of rebellion and ruin, faith and forgetting. But every storm, every silence, every burden carried had led here, to equilibrium. Atlas looked upward. The heavens were clear tonight, a velvet ocean scattered with suns. Constellations drifted with slow grace, no longer chaotic, no longer trembling with the tension of divided powers. Even the Milky Way glowed softer, like the quiet exhale after millennia of labor. He had held through it all. And though his arms still bore the stars, they no longer trembled. His strength had become serenity. So, he murmured to the cosmos, "This is what it means to carry and not to fight." He remembered the war of the Titans, the screaming, the thunder, the fury of gods tearing heaven from earth. He remembered the sting of betrayal, the agony of defeat, the loneliness of being left to hold what no one else could. Now, that same sky was calm, not conquered, but composed. From Olympus, the old gods watched. Time had softened even Zeus. His beard was streaked with silver light, his thunder quiet. He stood upon the clouded throne and gazed toward the west, where the curve of the heavens rested upon Atlas's back. "He holds with peace now," Zeus said quietly. Beside him, Athena's eyes glowed in the dusk. "Wisdom was always his punishment and his gift," she said. "He understands balance better than any of us." Hera nodded. "We condemned him to bear the world. Instead, he became its keeper." And so even the gods bowed their heads, not in pity, but in reverence. Below, mortals carried on their endless movement, their inventions, their wars, their dreams. They had long since forgotten the true name of the one who steadied the sky above them, but it did not matter. They lived under his care just the same. Atlas had become part of the universal law, invisible but essential. He was no longer separate from the balance, he was the balance. Each sunrise, he could feel the transfer of energy from night to day, the shifting tension of shadow into light, of cold into warmth. When mortals slept, he felt their breath merge with the rhythm of the air. When storms broke across oceans, their power ran through his spine and into the stars above, completing the eternal circuit between heaven and earth. The world was no longer divided. It was whole. And though no songs were sung for him, the harmony of existence itself was music enough. Sometimes, he would glance toward the horizon and remember those who had crossed his path, the old titans who had fallen to pride, the gods who had risen to rule, the heroes who had dared to stand before him. He thought of Heracles, the mortal who had briefly shared his burden. That moment, so fleeting in the endless timeline of eternity, had changed him forever. Strength, Atlas said softly, was never the lifting of the sky. It was the knowing of when to set it down. He smiled then, a faint, timeless smile that cracked the mountains like dawn. For the first time, he understood what Zeus never had, that power alone could never maintain order. Only patience could. Only endurance, tempered with understanding, could hold the world together. Above him, the stars shifted slightly, slow, deliberate, like a bow of gratitude. The constellations seemed to move in rhythm, aligning themselves into new forms, not of battle or conquest, but of unity. The Pleiades gleamed like gentle eyes. Orion lowered his bow. Even the great scorpion dimmed its sting. It was as if the heavens themselves acknowledged his revelation. "Balance," Atlas whispered. It was always the answer. The wind changed. The air hummed with energy, like 1,000 unseen wings. For a moment, it felt as though the sky had exhaled in relief, not lighter, not heavier, but right. And in that stillness, Atlas felt something he had never felt before, gratitude. He had been condemned to bear the heavens, yet through that burden he had become the axis of creation. The universe existed because he endured it. Every atom of light, every drop of rain, every breath of wind was a thread in the web that he quietly sustained. Without his punishment, there would have been no order. Without his endurance, there would have been no beauty. He bowed his head slightly, not in servitude, but in humility. Then I was never cursed, he said. I was needed. The world answered him. The sea grew calm. The air grew warm. The stars above shimmered brighter, reflecting his realization back at him. Far across the universe, galaxies turned like vast, slow wheels. Their motion sang to him in frequencies beyond sound, weaving through his body like light through glass. He could feel the symmetry of all things, from the pull of gravity that bound the stars to the soft heartbeat of a child asleep on earth. Every motion had its countermotion. Every weight had its balance. Every sorrow its reflection in joy. This was the great secret, the truth buried within his eternal sentence. The burden of the sky was not a punishment. It was a lesson, that existence itself depends on the equilibrium between what rises and what endures. Atlas, the rebel, the warrior, the fallen titan, had become the very essence of harmony. He no longer wished to be freed. Freedom, he now saw, was not the absence of burden. It was the acceptance of purpose. The heavens turned once more, perfectly poised, the constellations drifting like gentle waves. And at the center of it all stood Atlas, silent, strong, eternal, the unseen heartbeat of creation. He whispered, not to gods, not to men, but to the universe itself. We are whole again. And for a brief, golden moment, even the stars seemed to bow. Could Atlas's burden be the reason the world still stands, or is the world standing proof that some burdens were always sacred? There was a time when every god believed in punishment, when justice meant retribution and order meant fear. But the longer Atlas held the sky, the more the universe itself began to challenge that idea. Punishment, he realized, had a rhythm. It began with rebellion, passed through pain, and ended, if endured long enough, in understanding. That was the truth Zeus had never seen. Now, as the stars breathed softly above him, Atlas no longer felt the weight of wrath. He felt the pulse of purpose. The sky, once a prison, had become a partnership. Its pressure no longer bruised his flesh, it shaped him. It was not his punishment that defined him, but his acceptance of it. Perhaps the gods, he whispered, knew less than they believed. He thought back to that moment of judgment, Zeus standing tall, lightning coiling through his veins, declaring the sentence, "You shall hold the heavens for all eternity, so that you may understand the burden of rebellion." How young they had all been then. Zeus, barely crowned. The Olympians, radiant and uncertain. The Titans, too proud to kneel. And Atlas, caught between loyalty and conviction, believing that strength alone could right the wrongs of creation. But now he understood that rebellion was never truly against others, it was against ignorance. His defiance had forced the world to confront imbalance. His endurance had restored it. So, was that truly punishment? Or prophecy? In his silence, he heard the voice of his mother, Gaia, from deep within the earth. "My son," the wind murmured through the soil, "you were never meant to suffer. You were meant to stabilize." He closed his eyes. For the first time since the dawn of time, he let a single tear fall. It struck the ground like molten gold, carving a thin river down the mountain. That river would one day nourish new life, forests, animals, civilizations. Even his grief was fertile. The gods of Olympus watched this transformation from afar. Hera turned to Zeus and said softly, "He does not curse us. Even now." Zeus's face was unreadable. "Perhaps that is why he has surpassed us." Surpassed? Hera frowned. How can one punished surpass the judge? Zeus looked toward the western horizon, where the heavens rested upon the Titan's shoulders. "Because we rule by thunder," he said. "He rules by silence. And silence endures longer than any storm." For a long time, neither spoke again. Below, Atlas straightened. The stars rolled gently over him, shifting like a living crown. The constellations, those eternal witnesses, seemed to rearrange themselves once more, as if rewriting the old hierarchies of myth. The Titan's burden, it seemed, had changed even the heavens. In the far reaches of the cosmos, the Pleiades, his daughters, shone brighter than ever before. Their light shimmered like a promise across the night. He gazed upon them, and the endless patience in his eyes softened into love. "You see," he whispered to them. "Even this was never cruelty. It was creation continuing through me." Each of his daughters, eternal in their dance, answered through the starlight, flickers of light pulsing in slow harmony, like celestial heartbeats. Their orbits traced invisible songs that only he could hear. It was the first true peace he had ever known. Mortals far below, unaware of divine reconciliations, began to rediscover old fragments of his myth. In crumbling temples, in the lines of philosophers, in the art of scholars, his story returned, not as tragedy, but as metaphor. One poet wrote, "He bears not the sky, but the lesson. That to carry one's fate is not defeat, but devotion." The poem traveled through centuries, translated and reimagined, until its words became the foundation of a philosophy, that meaning is not found in freedom, but in how one bears the inevitable. Atlas became the unseen teacher of endurance once more. And in his stillness, the Titan realized something deeper: Zeus's judgment had ended long ago. The gods might have declared his sentence eternal, but eternity, too, obeys balance. The punishment had served its purpose. What remained was not imprisonment, but choice. He could let go if he wished. The universe would not collapse, it had learned from him. The heavens could now hold themselves, sustained by the equilibrium he had taught them. He tested the thought gently. A breath. A shift. The sky quivered but did not fall. Freedom was there, waiting, as patient as he had once been. And yet, he did not take it. Because he understood what mortals often forget: freedom without purpose is another kind of weight. He smiled faintly. "No," he whispered. "I will hold a while longer. Not because I must, but because I choose to." In that moment, the cosmos changed again. The stars around him pulsed once, twice, as if acknowledging his will. The balance was perfect, not imposed, not forced, but chosen. The wind calmed. The air shimmered gold. And somewhere, deep in the mortal world, a philosopher awoke from a dream and scribbled words onto parchment. The highest form of strength is to bear willingly what cannot be changed. He did not know why he wrote it, nor to whom it belonged. But centuries later, people would call it wisdom, unaware that its source was a whisper from a Titan. Above, Atlas lifted his head slightly. He could feel the gratitude of creation itself flowing through him. The burden no longer crushed, it connected. He was the thread between heaven and earth, the steady hand that kept everything from unraveling. Zeus's punishment had become the world's foundation. And for the first time in all of eternity, Atlas spoke to the gods who had once condemned him. "Thank you." In Olympus, thunder rolled, not in anger, but in wonder. Because even they, the immortals, understood that something sacred had happened: a curse had turned into a covenant. Atlas had transformed his punishment into meaning. The universe was not heavy anymore. It was holy. He closed his eyes, listening to the music of balance, the hum of stars, the murmur of tides, the quiet heartbeat of every mortal who carried their own piece of the sky. He was no longer holding the heavens. He was in harmony with them. And that, he knew, was the truest kind of immortality. What if fate's harshest gifts are also its greatest honors, and the sky itself was never a burden, but a promise kept? Stillness. That was all that remained. Not the stillness of stone or death, but a deeper, living stillness. A kind of awareness that stretched beyond movement, beyond time. It was not silence. It was balance, the calm between every heartbeat of the universe. Atlas stood at the center of it, unmoving yet more alive than he had ever been. The heavens no longer weighed upon him as they once did. They rested there, perfectly aligned, like a crown fitted to the head of a patient king. The pressure of eternity had become familiar, not oppressive, but rhythmic. Every tremor of the stars echoed in his chest. Every comet's path, every planetary tide, every whispered wish of mortals below resonated through him like music. He was no longer the bearer of the sky, he was its pulse. It was strange, he thought, how stillness could feel so full. When he had first been condemned, stillness was torment, the prison of someone who once ran with thunder and warred against gods. He had fought against it, cursed it, screamed into it. But after ages beyond counting, he realized something profound. Stillness is not the absence of life, it is the foundation of it. The stars needed his calm so they could move freely. The world needed his steadiness so it could spin without falling apart. I hold, he whispered, so that all may dance. It was a revelation too quiet for the gods to hear, but the universe understood. Above him, the constellations shimmered faintly in approval. The Pleiades, his daughters, drifted across the night in gentle orbit, each one gleaming like a heartbeat of memory. He watched their slow passage and felt not sorrow, but serenity. They had become what he could never be, free, wandering, luminous. And in their freedom, he found peace. Once, he might have envied them. Now, he only admired. For he had learned the truth that escapes even the gods, that stillness is not surrender. It is mastery. He thought of mortals who struggled endlessly, their lives so brief yet so full of movement. They chased meaning, grasped for freedom, ran from silence. Yet all of them, at some point, found themselves still, in grief, in love, in awe. And in that stillness, they met the divine. Perhaps that was why the gods allowed suffering. Not as cruelty, but as a way to teach mortals the sacred art of stillness, the ability to stand, breathe, and bear. A soft wind curled around his shoulders, carrying with it the scent of salt and pine. It reminded him of the edge of the world, the place where his daughter's garden once bloomed, where Heracles had once stood, where the horizon still hummed with the echo of old conversations. He could almost hear the demigod's voice again. If that is the price, then I accept it. Heracles had borne the heavens for only a moment, but that moment had changed the course of gods and men alike. Endurance, Atlas murmured, is not measured in years. It is measured in choice. He had chosen his burden long after it was forced upon him. And now, by choosing it again each moment, he turned fate into freedom. The stillness deepened. The universe exhaled. From Olympus, Athena looked west and said to Zeus, "He has entered the quiet beyond divinity." Zeus, who had long since outgrown thunder, nodded. Then he has surpassed us all. Below them, the mortal world spun. Seasons turned, empires rose and fell, languages were born and forgotten. Yet the mountains that bore his name remained, vast, unyielding, ancient. To those who walked their slopes, it was as if the world itself whispered, "Here stands the one who never fell." Artists carved him into marble. Scholars wrote of him in the margins of their philosophies. Mystics meditated upon his symbol, a man, bent but unbroken, holding the infinite. They said that to sit in stillness was to honor him. And so, through meditation, prayer, and quiet reflection, humanity learned to echo his endurance, not through grand gestures, but through breath. Even when his name was forgotten, his stillness remained as instinct. When a mother hushed her crying child, when a soldier steadied his shaking hands, when a lover paused before saying farewell, all of them, unknowingly, were living fragments of Atlas's calm. For stillness, once learned, spreads. And in that spreading, the Titan found immortality more perfect than any crown of Olympus could offer. He looked out across creation. The stars no longer shimmered in isolation, they pulsed in harmony, a vast, breathing network of light. The planets moved with quiet precision. The earth beneath him spun gently, never faltering, never forgetting the rhythm he had taught it. Atlas smiled. "They move because I am still," he said softly. "And I am still because they move." It was the perfect loop, the eternal balance between action and peace, motion and rest. In that balance, he no longer felt alone. Every flicker of starlight, every beat of mortal heart, every whisper of wind carried his essence. The universe itself had become his companion. He thought, perhaps, this was what true godhood meant, not dominion, but integration. Not command, but communion. Atlas no longer needed to be worshipped. The world's movement was worship enough. The night deepened. The stars shimmered closer. He could feel them leaning in, as if listening. "I am not the end," he whispered. "I am the pause between beginnings." And in that pause, creation breathed. The waves slowed. The wind rested. Even the heartbeat of time hesitated, reverent. He closed his eyes. The cosmos swayed like a cradle around him. He was no longer the punished titan, no longer the rebel or the myth. He was the axis, the quiet fulcrum upon which existence turned. The stillness was complete, but it was not empty. It was alive, eternal, and infinite. And as mortals slept beneath his unseen shadow, as stars drifted across the velvet dark, one truth remained. Stillness is strength. The titan had not fallen. He had become the sky. What has Atlas become, statue, symbol, or the living stillness that keeps creation breathing? There is a lesson that outlives gods, cities, and even stars. It moves like wine through time, invisible, unbroken, whispering the same truth in 1,000 languages. That lesson is endurance. Atlas had become its embodiment, not the teacher by speech, but by silence. His stillness was the textbook, his burden, the parable. For what greater proof of wisdom could there be than the being who carried eternity without resentment? In the vast stillness, the titan began to sense something beyond even himself, the slow circulation of meaning through the universe. Every age that passed seemed to draw from his example, civilizations learning, collapsing, learning again. He felt it first in the minds of philosophers who gazed at the night and asked, "What holds everything together?" He felt it again in the hearts of mortals who endured heartbreak and loss, yet still rose the next day. And in each act of perseverance, he heard echoes of his own heartbeat. The gods had once claimed that Atlas's burden was punishment for pride. But now, through countless eons of observation, he knew better. His task had not been punishment, it was pedagogy. The universe had chosen him as its first student. He was the experiment through which existence taught itself how to balance chaos and creation. And balance, he realized, was not peace. It was motion sustained by purpose. From his perch at the edge of the world, he watched as mortals discovered this truth again and again, each in their own way. A farmer tending his crops through drought. A builder rebuilding after ruin. A mother nursing her child while the war raged outside. Each one was a fragment of him, endurance in flesh, meaning in motion. He whispered, though no one could hear. The weight is not the curse. Forgetting why you carry it is. Once, he had wanted to rebel against Zeus forever. Now, he pitied him. For Zeus had wielded thunder, but not patience. He had ruled through awe, not understanding. And awe fades quickly, but understanding endures. Perhaps that was why mortals no longer prayed to Olympus. They had outgrown the need to beg. Instead, they lived, carrying their own skies, surviving their own storms. They had taken the divine lesson and made it human. Atlas smiled at that thought. The student had surpassed the gods. Far above him, his daughters, the Pleiades, continued their dance across the night. Their movement was slow but certain, eternal yet fleeting. Watching them, Atlas saw the perfect metaphor, light enduring through distance, meaning surviving through generations. Even stars, he realized, carried burdens. They bore the gravity of their own brilliance until they collapsed, not in failure, but in transformation. Their deaths seeded new worlds. Their fall was creation. And so, the eternal lesson deepened, to bear is to build. He could feel this truth ripple through creation like a wave. It reached even the smallest corners of human thought. Artists began to paint Atlas not as a punished god, but as a figure of wisdom, the strong, silent guardian who held everything together. Philosophers began to quote him in absence, endurance is the cost of purpose. Teachers, monks, and dreamers spoke his lesson without knowing its origin. Strength is not resistance, they said. It is persistence. Atlas's myth had transcended itself. He was no longer a story, he was a principle woven into existence. And yet, even principles need witnesses. There were still nights when the Titan wondered if anyone truly understood. He had seen so many worlds burn, so many hearts break. Did they see meaning in their suffering, or only pain? He lowered his gaze toward the mortal realm. A storm was raging across the oceans. Waves collided with cliffs in furious rhythm. But within one of those waves, reflected for a brief instant in the lightning's flash, he saw something, a single fishing boat, tossed like a leaf, yet still steering forward. A lone sailor, soaked and shaking, fought the storm without surrender. Every push of the oar, every breath between waves, was a prayer without words. Atlas felt the rhythm of that struggle sync with his own. The mortal would never know that a Titan had watched him, or that the calm that came after his storm was not chance but acknowledgement. He has learned, Atlas whispered. He has understood. For in that man's small endurance was the same essence that held the heavens aloft. And that was the eternal lesson, that meaning does not live in triumph, but in persistence. Mortals, gods, stars, all of them were bound by the same law, what is carried with purpose becomes sacred. Centuries turned. The constellations drifted again. Empires crumbled into dust, their ruins swallowed by moss. Yet the myth of Atlas persisted, reshaping itself for each new tongue. To some, he was the guardian of endurance. To others, the martyr of balance. To a few, the invisible axis of the cosmos itself. And to those who looked closer, those who listened not with their ears, but with their hearts, he was the voice inside that whispered, "Hold a little longer." That whisper became legend. Across distant cultures, it surfaced in different forms, as proverbs, as prayers, as simple words scrawled on walls, "This too shall pass." No one realized those words were his echo. Atlas stood through it all, through the ages of myth, through the silence of disbelief, through the rise of science and the death of superstition. Yet, no matter how the world changed, his lesson remained constant: endurance creates meaning, and meaning redeems suffering. He looked once more to the sky he carried, his old companion, his eternal teacher. "You and I," he said softly, "we are not burdened. We are balanced." The wind answered through the stars, a long, low hum that rippled through galaxies. Perhaps, he thought, the universe was finally speaking his language. He closed his eyes again. Stillness returned, not heavy, but alive. The eternal lesson had been learned, and it would never be forgotten, because it now lived in every act of endurance, in every quiet strength, in every being who carried on when they could have collapsed. Atlas smiled, his voice a breath on the wind. To endure is divine. To understand it, eternal. What might we learn from a God who never moved, yet never fell, who taught the stars themselves the meaning of balance? Every soul carries something unseen. It might not be a sky filled with stars, but it feels just as heavy. The burdens of love, loss, memory, and meaning, they weigh upon us like invisible heavens. And though we may not call it divine, the truth is this: in every person who endures, there lives a fragment of Atlas. The story of the Titan was never meant to end with him. It was meant to continue through us. When the ancient poets first told his tale, they thought it a warning, a tragedy of rebellion turned to eternal servitude. But as the centuries unfolded, and human hearts learned to hold their own storms, the story changed. It became a mirror, a reflection of what it means to live, to carry, and to keep going when no one is watching. We all inherit a portion of his weight. A father who works through exhaustion to keep his family safe. A nurse who stands through endless nights, guarding the fragile boundary between life and death. A child who grows up too soon, holding the pieces of a broken home together. Each of them is Atlas, quiet, unthanked, enduring. And though their burdens differ in form, the feeling is the same, a mixture of exhaustion and grace. The pressure that could destroy also refines. The very act of holding on becomes holy. Atlas feels this. He feels it in the way the earth hums through his bones, millions of heartbeats pulsing in quiet rhythm. He feels the fatigue of mortals, their small triumphs, their whispered prayers, their silent courage. He has become more than myth. He is empathy embodied, the unspoken connection between every soul that struggles and survives. From his post beneath the heavens, he watches humanity's endless dance. There are days when the world seems to collapse under its own noise, wars, greed, loss. But even then, there are flickers of light, people lifting one another, voices singing in the dark, hands steadying trembling shoulders. Each act of compassion lightens his burden, even if just a fraction. They are learning, he whispers to the wind. They are carrying not out of fear, but love. That, he realizes, was the secret all along. The gods held the world through might, mortals hold it through meaning. And meaning is stronger than any chain. The Titan looks upon them with quiet pride. Humanity has done what even Olympus could not, turn endurance into art. They have painted it in their faces, sung it in their grief, written it in their stories. Even their tragedies have beauty, because in every one of them there is persistence. He sees it everywhere. In the painter who returns to her canvas after failure. In the soldier who chooses mercy over vengeance. In the old man who still plants a tree, knowing he will never sit beneath its shade. Each is an echo of his eternal pose, not bowed in defeat, but grounded in purpose. Perhaps, he thinks, the greatest act of strength is not to resist weight, but to accept it. And so, as the world spins onward, Atlas watches as mortals begin to carry the sky in their own ways. Some through knowledge, scientists mapping constellations and exploring galaxies once thought divine. Others through kindness, holding the fragile skies of others when they falter. They do not lift the heavens, but they uphold hope. And that, he realizes, is the same thing. The sky was never mine alone, he says softly. It belongs to all who stand beneath it. He can feel the truth of it resonate through creation. The burden, once centralized on his shoulders, now exists in countless forms across the world, distributed through compassion, endurance, and shared strength. This was the destiny the gods never foresaw, that the divine act of holding would become human. Even Zeus, watching from afar, senses the shift. The old order has faded, worship is no longer needed for balance to endure. Atlas has taught humanity to carry themselves. For every tear that falls, every breath taken after loss, every act of forgiveness, the equilibrium is maintained. The stars shimmer in approval. The Pleiades gleam brighter, their light casting long, soft trails over the world. Atlas smiles. You see, he murmurs to his daughters, they are lifting now. And I am not alone. It is strange, he thinks, to carry for so long, only to learn that the purpose was to share it. And as he stands there, unmoving, he feels something miraculous, the weight grows lighter. Not because it has diminished, but because it has been distributed, countless invisible hands holding up their own skies across the earth. He closes his eyes and listens. The noise of civilization is loud, but beneath it, there is rhythm, the heartbeat of billions, all bearing, all breathing. The hum of humanity has become the new music of creation. In this realization, Atlas finds peace. His burden has become communion. He understands now that every act of endurance adds balance to the world, every person who refuses to break adds another unseen pillar beneath the sky. When mortals gather around fires and tell stories of strength, they are retelling his. When they look at statues of men holding globes, they are seeing themselves. Because Atlas's lesson was never about divine punishment, it was about shared resilience. Even in the smallest life, in the quietest struggle, the same cosmic truth resounds: to endure is to sustain the world. And so the myth lives on, not as ancient memory, but as modern instinct. We carry it in our shoulders, in our silence, in our ability to keep moving forward. Atlas no longer stands alone. He never did. His burden has become humanity's bond. He whispers once more to the stars, a voice as calm as gravity itself. What rests upon my back now rests within their hearts. The constellations shimmer, the heavens shift, and the universe answers in kind, not with thunder, but with stillness. The same stillness that once defined him now defines us. Because every burden, no matter how great, is lighter when shared. And every time we rise after falling, the world rises with us. What sky rests upon your shoulders tonight, and what strength awakens when you decide to keep holding it? Night returns again, slow, soft, and infinite. The stars breathe like embers across the velvet dark, and beneath them stands the Titan who has outlasted time itself. Yet something has changed in the air. The heavens no longer tremble above him. They rest, peaceful, weightless, as if finally at ease with the one who holds them. Atlas has become more than a bearer. He has become a guardian. A keeper. His punishment has turned into grace, and the sky, once his enemy, now leans on him like an old friend. Each night feels gentler than the one before. The constellations drift like quiet thoughts, and the wind moves with reverence through the mountain ridges that cradle his feet. The world below sleeps, unaware of the divine stillness keeping everything balanced above. But he does not need them to know. It is enough that they dream. When mortals dream, the sky glows brighter. Their imaginations light new stars, and their hopes, fragile, flickering things, rise upward like sparks from a sacred fire. Atlas watches these sparks collect among the constellations, joining his daughter's light, becoming part of the living sky. Every dream that endures adds balance to his burden. He has learned to listen for them, whispers from millions of sleeping souls. Some dream of love found, others of sorrow healed. Some dream of worlds beyond their own, of futures brighter than memory. And in each dream, Atlas hears the quiet echo of his own story, the will to hold on. Once, the sky was his punishment. Now, it is his choir. He hums with it. The stars respond, pulsing faintly, like candles flickering to the rhythm of his heart. The Pleiades shimmer in the distance, their light brushing against his face like a father's blessing returned. He looks to them and smiles. Shine, he whispers. Show them that beauty endures. Down below, in the mortal world, a poet stirs from sleep and writes a line she does not understand. The night is kind because someone still holds it. Her words, carried on paper and wind, will one day inspire countless others, though she will never know that her pen was guided by a Titan's patience. Atlas has become invisible in the best way, not forgotten, but absorbed into the fabric of peace. For the first time in all existence, the sky feels light. It bends around him like silk, shimmering with colors too soft for mortal sight: amber, violet, silver. The air glows faintly, as if the boundary between heaven and earth has dissolved. And within that glow, Atlas feels something he has never felt before: tenderness. The universe, it seems, has begun to care for him as he has always cared for it. The balance he maintained for ages has turned reciprocal. The stars lean toward him, the wind wraps around him like a robe, and the quiet hum of creation sings lullabies in his ears. He closes his eyes, not to rest, but to listen. He hears it, the music of everything. The waves rolling on distant shores. The hum of insects in forests half a world away. The slow groan of glaciers, the heartbeat of mountains, the sigh of clouds. Every note is connected, woven through the same cosmic thread that binds all things to his stance. It is the song of balance. And Atlas, at last, is part of it, not as the burdened Titan, but as the conductor of calm. He no longer fights time. He flows with it. Mortals who look upon the night sky sense this change without knowing why. The air feels softer. The stars seem warmer. Something about the heavens feels kind. That kindness is him. It radiates down through the constellations, wrapping the world in a gentler rhythm. Children fall asleep more easily. The restless find calm. Even the winds over the ocean seem to slow their rage. The Titan has not merely endured, he has begun to heal. And in that healing, the universe follows suit. He remembers the chaos that once was, the screaming wars of gods, the shattering of mountains, the collapse of Atlantis. He remembers the sound of divine fury, and how it once echoed through the heavens like thunder. That sound no longer exists. The sky is quiet now. But it is not an empty quiet. It is a sacred silence, the kind found only after understanding. Peace, Atlas whispers, was never something to win. It was something to hold. He feels a breeze pass over him, cool and steady. In it, he senses the presence of his mother, Gaia, the earth herself. Her voice hums through the soil and stone. You have learned, my son. You have become what the world needed. He bows his head slightly. Then let me keep it safe, he answers. And so he does. Every night, he stands watch. The constellations drift like gentle waves, and his form becomes the unspoken promise that no storm will ever shatter the heavens again. He is not a god of wrath, nor a monument to rebellion. He is something far quieter, the soul of endurance turned into compassion. Even Zeus, far above on his silver throne, cannot help but watch in awe. Once I judged him, he admits to Hera. Now, I envy him. He does not rule by fear, but by presence. Hera nods. Then perhaps it is time the gods learn from the Titan. Below, the mortals dream on. Their world spins, their skies remain steady, and in their hearts lives a calm they cannot name. When they look up, they see stars. But what they truly see, what their spirits recognize, is the gentleness holding those stars in place. Atlas has become that gentleness. The sky rests not upon his strength, but upon his peace. And so, the heavens themselves seem to sigh in gratitude. The galaxies drift slower. The stars shine softer. The cosmos, once wild and unbalanced, now breathes in perfect rhythm with its keeper. He is no longer the Titan punished for defiance. He is the Titan who forgave the gods, the bearer who turned burden into blessing. And in that forgiveness, the universe finally exhaled. The night deepens. The stars shimmer brighter. The weight that once defined him now defines the serenity of creation itself. Sleep well, my children, he murmurs to the world below. The sky is safe. The wind carries his words like a lullaby, weaving through the trees, the waves, the dreams of mortals. It settles softly into the hearts of all who listen, even those who do not know his name. For peace, like endurance, needs no recognition. It simply is. Does the universe sleep upon his back, or within his heart? There comes a night when even the stars seem to pause, as if they, too, are listening. High above the sleeping world, the heavens shimmer with a strange clarity. The constellations are brighter, the air thinner, the silence vast. In that stillness, a shape begins to form, subtle, patient, ancient. The figure of a man, bowed yet unbroken. Atlas. He no longer stands upon mountains or at the edge of the world. He has risen beyond it, his story etched into the firmament itself. The gods may fade, the temples may fall, but his image, carved in light across eternity, remains. He is now a constellation. Mortals, gazing upward on clear nights, can trace his outline, shoulders broad as horizons, knees bent beneath the arch of the heavens. To some, it looks like a warrior. To others, a guardian. But to the few who truly see, it is neither, it is peace given form. The stars have immortalized him not as punishment, but as promise. It began quietly. Over centuries, the ancient astronomers charted new clusters of light. They named the 7 daughters first, the Pleiades, radiant and distant. Then, among them, they found a faint, strong shape connecting the western stars, the invisible spine holding the celestial sphere in place. They called it Atlas. It was a name whispered with reverence, not fear. For by then, his myth had changed in meaning. He was no longer the Titan who defied Zeus, but the one who upheld harmony, the quiet keeper of the sky. And as the story spread across cultures and continents, the constellation took root in the human imagination. Sailors used it to navigate oceans. Philosophers used it to ponder eternity. Lovers looked to it and made vows beneath its light, promising to carry each other's skies. Even now, thousands of years later, his constellation endures, faint, patient, eternal. But if you could see it from above, from the view of the cosmos itself, you would notice something extraordinary. The stars forming Atlas's shape are not static. They move, slow, graceful, alive. Over millennia, they trace the rhythm of his breath, expanding and contracting with cosmic precision. The universe, it seems, still moves in time with him. Atlas feels it too. Though his form has become light, he remains aware, a consciousness threaded through gravity and starlight. His voice is no longer sound but resonance, a vibration that hums in every atom that holds its place. He no longer needs to speak, because his presence has become the language of the cosmos. He sees the earth below, glowing blue and gold, spinning in perfect poise. He watches continents drift like memories, mountains rise, seas breathe. Humanity, so small yet so luminous, continues to grow, to stumble, to stand again. They have forgotten his face, but they live by his rhythm. In every tower that stands against the wind, in every bridge that spans impossible gaps, in every heart that chooses to endure, there he is. Even science, that modern form of wonder, carries his name. The Atlas Mountains, the Atlas rockets, the Atlas observatories, all bear silent tribute to the one who held it all. He smiles through starlight. They have remembered me, he murmurs. Not as a god, but as strength itself. The Pleiades shimmer near him, his daughters still guiding travelers across the night. Their glow pulses softly, like laughter carried on wind. Father, their light seems to say, you are not alone. And for the first time, after eons of holding, Atlas feels something like rest. He understands now that rest is not the absence of burden, it is the acceptance of it. Even in eternity, he carries. But he carries with joy. The heavens above him expand endlessly, galaxies blooming like flowers in the dark. Each one a reflection of what he has learned, that endurance births creation. That to hold the universe is to love it. And so, the myth becomes a cycle of its own, endurance creating balance, balance creating peace, peace creating life, and life, once more, learning to endure. On earth, a child gazes up at the night sky. She points to the faint band of stars stretching across the horizon and asks her mother, "What's that one called?" The mother smiles. "That's Atlas, sweetheart, the Titan who holds up the heavens." The child squints, curious. Why doesn't he put it down? The mother thinks for a moment, watching the soft shimmer of the constellation. Maybe because if he did, she says, the stars would forget how to shine. Above them, the constellation seems to brighten, a soft pulse of light, as if acknowledging the truth in her words. The stars are not heavy anymore. They float upon his strength like feathers upon the wind. The sky is no longer something to endure, but something to cradle. The Titan who once bore punishment now carries peace. Zeus himself, older and quieter now, gazes at the heavens from Olympus. He has outlasted us all, he says to Athena. The goddess of wisdom smiles. Because he stopped trying to rule the sky, and chose instead to care for it. Their voices fade into the hum of eternity, leaving only the silent glow of the constellations. Atlas's stars continue to burn, slow, steady, eternal. His form remains a bridge between heaven and earth, myth and meaning, divine and human. And as time drifts forward, new civilizations rise beneath his gaze. They build telescopes that see farther, instruments that measure light older than creation itself. They give the stars new names, but the essence remains unchanged. Every night, someone somewhere looks upward, in wonder, in sorrow, in hope, and finds him waiting there. Not a god demanding worship. Not a warning of defiance. But a reminder. A symbol that strength and gentleness are not opposites. That even the heaviest burdens can become beauty. That to carry with love is to turn suffering into starlight. The Titan of endurance has become the keeper of serenity. His shoulders hold not punishment, but purpose. His gaze rests not on rebellion, but on renewal. He is the sky's gentle keeper. The eternal heartbeat of harmony. And as his constellation glows faintly over the turning earth, a whisper drifts through the night, ancient, patient, infinite. Perhaps the gods never truly punished him, they crowned him. The stars shimmer brighter, and for a moment, it feels as if the whole universe is smiling. Was the burden ever truly a curse, or was it the crown of one who learned to love what he carried? The stars are eternal, but stories are what give them purpose. And among all stories ever whispered beneath their light, few carry the quiet weight of Atlas, the Titan who bore the heavens, not as punishment, but as understanding. Now, his myth no longer belongs to the age of gods. It belongs to us. For when the last temple crumbled and the marble faces of the Olympians faded into dust, Atlas remained. Not as stone, not as sky, but as symbol. His endurance became the invisible foundation upon which humanity built its meaning. Every age reinterprets him. Every heart rediscovers him. He is the patient whisper in every moment of despair that says, "Stand again." When artists paint a figure holding the world, they think of resilience. When poets speak of bearing one's cross or weathering one's storm, they echo his voice. When philosophers ask what gives existence value, they find the answer in his silence. Atlas has transcended mythology. He has become psychology, a mirror of the human spirit. For to live, in any form, is to carry something. And within that weight lies worth. It took gods to create the cosmos. But it takes endurance to keep it spinning. In that truth, the line between divine and mortal dissolves. The same law that binds stars in orbit, gravity, binds hearts to hope. Atlas is that law personified. He is the reminder that what grounds us also gives us purpose. He endures so that we may endure. And yet, it is not a story of suffering. It is a story of transformation. The first storytellers who spoke his name saw tragedy, a rebel crushed by divine judgment. But the later poets, wiser and more human, began to see something else, transcendence. What if Atlas's punishment was not a sentence, but a path? What if the gods, in condemning him to hold the heavens, unknowingly gave him the highest role, to be the eternal connection between heaven and earth? His burden, after all, kept the world in balance. Without him, chaos would reign. Without his steadiness, neither gods nor mortals could exist. So how can that be punishment? Atlas's silence answers with humility. The weight we carry, he would say if he could, is the proof that we matter. And so, every person who has ever carried love, grief, responsibility, or hope, becomes a living continuation of his story. Even now, in the modern world, his spirit endures in ways subtle yet unmistakable. When an astronaut gazes at the curvature of Earth and feels the fragile balance of existence, Atlas is there. When a mountain climber reaches the summit and feels the vastness pressing above, Atlas is there. When someone grieving whispers, "I'll keep going," and does, Atlas is there. He has become the quiet god of perseverance, the unspoken saint of those who endure without reward. And perhaps that is the truest kind of divinity, not to rule, not to conquer, but to support. In every civilization that rose after the fall of Olympus, the myth of Atlas survived in disguised forms. Some called him the world-bearer. Others called him the axis, or the pillar of time. In Eastern myth, he took new names, cosmic turtles, sacred elephants, endless trees. But all told the same truth, the world must be held, and someone must hold it. The names changed. The lesson did not. In cathedrals, he became the quiet saint sculpted into the corner, a man bent beneath a sphere, unseen by the worshippers who passed him daily. In philosophy, he became the idea that existence persists through effort, that being alive means participating in balance. In art, he became symbol, the one who carries, and therefore connects. Through all these forms, one message endures: the act of holding is divine. It is why humans love heroes. Not because they win, but because they withstand. The old gods might have wielded thunder, but the true power lies in the quiet will to persist through darkness. That is why Atlas outlasted them. He did not seek worship, and yet he became the foundation of faith itself, the belief that even under the greatest pressure, something unbreakable remains within us. And perhaps that is why, even in dreams, his presence lingers. When the night feels heavy, when the world feels too vast, the stars seem to hum softly, a pulse that says, "You are not alone." It is not imagination. It is resonance. Because the same energy that holds the heavens also lives within the human spirit. We are not beneath the weight of the sky, we are part of it. Atlas's burden is humanity's birthright, to hold, to balance, to endure. And when we do it with compassion, when we bear one another's skies, the universe steadies. In that act, every person becomes a little divine. Atlas no longer suffers. He observes, content. His constellation shines above, not as warning, but as lullaby. The stars of his shoulders glimmer faintly, guiding the eyes of wanderers and dreamers. Each light in that constellation is a reminder: strength does not roar, it breathes. And as the night deepens, the myth softens into meaning. Atlas no longer stands apart from the world. He is the world, in every act of endurance, in every breath of balance, in every quiet moment when someone chooses to keep going. His story began as rebellion, became punishment, and ended as peace. And that peace, at last, belongs to all who carry. The narrator's voice lowers, calm, reverent, and warm. The sky rests upon his shoulders still, but perhaps it rests upon ours too. Above, the constellation flickers once, twice, like the slow closing of a divine eye. The world below continues its rhythm, tides move, winds turn, hearts beat. The eternal cycle of endurance hums onward. And in that harmony, the final truth shines clear: the myth was never about gods or punishment. It was about us. When the sky rests upon your mind, will you stand as Atlas did, not in defiance, but in grace? And so the Titan stands, silent beneath the stars, the first and last pillar of the world. If his story has calmed your thoughts tonight, may his endurance cradle your dreams. Rest now, traveler of myth, until the next tale calls from beyond the sky.